In the heart of suburban Oregon, nestled between neatly trimmed lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs, stood the Whitaker residence. On the surface, it was exactly what you'd expect of the American dream. 2 stories. White siding. Red door. A basketball hoop over the garage, and a tire swing in the backyard. Neighbors waved when they passed by. Kids played tag down the sidewalks in summer, and the local HOA made sure no blade of grass dared to grow longer than regulation. This wasn't just any neighborhood, this was Cedar Grove. A planned community where security cameras dotted every corner and Amazon deliveries were more punctual than the mailman. And in the middle of it all, was 22 Birch Hollow Lane. To anyone looking from the outside, the Whitakers had it all. Richard Whitaker was a lead software engineer at a Portland-based startup that had just gone public. Tall, lean, always in khakis and a button-down, he was the kind of man who rarely raised his voice but somehow always commanded attention. You'd never catch him without his smartwatch, tracking his steps and heart rate like clockwork. He was what you'd call optimized. Lisa Whitaker was the kind of mom Pinterest was made for. Handwritten lunch notes, DIY Christmas ornaments, alphabetized spice racks. The kind of woman who could host a birthday party for 20 screaming third graders and somehow make it look effortless on Instagram. She had almost 4,000 followers on a mommy blogger page, where she shared everything from gluten-free cookie recipes to gentle parenting tips. And then there were the children. Ellie, the eldest, 12 years old, bookish, shy, and always in the background. She had the intelligence of someone twice her age, but something about her demeanor suggested she'd learned early to be invisible. Caleb, 9, was the opposite. Loud, competitive, a little wild, the kind of kid who had bruises on his shins from soccer and more energy than sense. And baby Sophie. Just turned 2. Lisa's pride and joy. Her little miracle. Yes, from the outside, it looked perfect. But as we all know, perfection is often the first red flag. It was April 14th. A Tuesday. The kind of morning where the air still clings to the last breath of winter. Cold, but trying. At 6:17 a.m., the first 911 call came in. A woman had been seen wandering barefoot along Interstate 5, disoriented, crying, and covered in blood. Not just any woman. Lisa Whitaker. Dashcam footage from a semi-truck later confirmed it. She was stumbling down the shoulder, arms out, waving frantically. Cars honked as they swerved. Her nightgown was torn. Her face was scratched. Her feet were bleeding. But it was the blood on her hands, caked into her wedding ring, smeared down her forearms, that raised the most questions. She was taken to Mercy General Hospital for evaluation. At first, responders thought she may have been in an accident. Or a victim of an assault. Possibly a domestic situation. But when asked where she'd come from, Lisa said something no one expected. "I can't go back there," she whispered. "They're still inside." "Who's inside?" the nurse asked. Lisa looked past her, into the fluorescent ceiling lights. "My children." When officers arrived at 22 Birch Hollow Lane just after 7:45 a.m., the house was quiet. Too quiet. There was no sign of forced entry. No alarms had been tripped. The family SUV was in the driveway. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. Eventually, they breached the front door, slowly, cautiously. What they found inside would trigger the beginning of one of the most disturbing investigations in Oregon's history. But before we go there, let's go back. Because to understand how we got to this moment, Lisa Whitaker bleeding on a highway, her children possibly trapped or worse, we have to rewind. Not just hours. Not just days. But years. The Whitakers moved into Cedar Grove in the fall of 2018. Richard had just accepted a position at Tricor Labs, a local tech firm building machine learning models for government contracts. He was brilliant, there was no question. But intense. Very, very intense. According to former co-workers, Richard didn't do small talk. He wasn't rude, he just didn't seem interested in anything that wasn't directly productive. He had a calendar blocked down to the minute. Weekly date nights with Lisa. Playtime scheduled for Caleb. Even spontaneous activities were logged as optional leisure. Lisa, on the other hand, charmed everyone. She joined the PDA within a month. Hosted a cookie exchange that December. People loved her. Especially at Grace Assembly Church, where the Whitakers became regulars. It's worth noting that the Whitakers weren't overly religious before Cedar Grove. But once they joined Grace Assembly, they threw themselves into it. Richard joined a men's accountability group. Lisa began attending Wednesday morning Bible studies. The kids were enrolled in youth programs. But it was also around this time, late 2019, that things started to change. Small things. Ellie became quieter at school. Teachers noted that she stopped raising her hand in class. Stopped turning in homework, too. One even scheduled a parent-teacher conference, but Lisa canceled, twice. When they finally met, Lisa insisted everything was fine. That Ellie was just transitioning. Caleb, who once played outside daily, now stayed indoors. Neighbors stopped seeing him. When they did, he seemed skittish. Avoidant. And Lisa's blog? Once updated weekly with tips and tricks and picture-perfect updates, it suddenly went dark. Her last post. Sometimes, even sunshine can burn. It got only 12 likes. So what happened inside that house? It depends on who you ask. Some neighbors say the Whitakers were just private. That maybe the stress of raising 3 kids got to them. That Lisa was overwhelmed. That Richard worked too much. Others? Others weren't so sure. There was one neighbor, an older woman named Deirdre, who lived across the street. She claimed she heard yelling one night. Screaming, actually. It didn't sound like a fight, she later told detectives. It sounded like someone begging. But no police reports were filed. No complaints were logged. Cedar Grove prided itself on self-regulation. Problems weren't talked about, they were ignored into non-existence. Until, of course, they couldn't be. Lisa hadn't been seen in days. Not at the grocery store. Not at church. Not even walking Sophie in the stroller, which she used to do every morning. Then came the Facebook post. It was brief. Just a single photo. A Bible. Torn down the spine. A shadow of what looked like a handprint beside it. The caption read, "Pray harder." It was deleted an hour later. But not before one of her followers took a screenshot. When police eventually combed through Lisa's social media, they found hundreds of posts had been archived. But they also found drafts, ones she never posted. One read, "I'm scared of what he'll do when he finds out I told someone." Another, "He has cameras in the walls. I can't prove it yet. But I know he does." And then the most chilling. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." So now, with Lisa in the hospital, barely coherent, slipping in and out of consciousness, police had only one option. Enter the Whitaker home. The first thing they noticed? The silence. No baby crying. No cartoons on the TV. Just a faint humming, like a refrigerator running. The living room was pristine. Too pristine. Not a pillow out of place. No signs of struggle. But then they opened the basement door. Lisa Whitaker was disoriented when paramedics found her. Shivering, barefoot, her eyes darting toward things that weren't there. Her lips moved constantly, a whispering stream of nonsense, or so it seemed at first. The light went out, she kept mumbling. The light, it's gone. And then, they're still in the basement. Still down there. Don't go down there. At first, law enforcement suspected a carjacking, maybe a botched abduction, or, given the blood on Lisa's body, a domestic dispute that escalated into violence. It wouldn't be the first time the smiling face of a suburban family shattered under pressure behind closed doors. But then officers arrived at 22 Birch Hollow Lane. The front door was ajar. No signs of struggle outside. No broken windows. No forced entry. Just silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Inside the house, everything was still. Immaculate. Eerie in its cleanliness. Sophie, the toddler, was found upstairs. In her crib. Asleep. Unharmed. A lullaby still playing from a Bluetooth speaker on the shelf. Her diapers were clean. She had a bottle, freshly warmed. Whoever had been there, if anyone, had taken the time to care for her. But Ellie and Caleb were missing. No trace of them. Their beds were untouched. Their rooms appeared undisturbed, except for one detail. Locks. On the inside of the bedroom doors. Industrial-grade slide bolts. Not typical child-proof locks. These were the kind of bolts you'd expect on a panic room. As if the children had been trying to keep something out. And then there were the cameras. Small, almost unnoticeable at first, mounted in corners, tucked behind smoke detectors. Not your standard baby monitor. These were surveillance grade. Recording 24/7. Every hallway. Every room, except the bathrooms. Each one connected to a private server. No cloud backups. All hardwired. Who was watching? And why? Then officers found the basement door. They radioed for backup. Breaching specialists. Forensics. Child Protective Services. The full stack. When they finally opened the door, methodically, carefully, the air that came out was cold. Not just temperature cold. Something else. The kind of cold you feel in your gut. The kind that tells you instinctively. You shouldn't be here. The stairwell descended into pitch black. The light switch at the top didn't work. Only after switching on their helmet flashlights did the truth begin to emerge. The basement wasn't a single open space. It had been subdivided, not by construction crews, but DIY partitions. Plywood walls. Metal brackets. Heavy tarps. Soundproof foam. 3 separate rooms. No windows. Each room with its own lock. And inside? The first room was empty. Just a bare mattress, stained. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling. It flickered and buzzed. The second room contained shelves. Dozens of them. Lined with labeled containers, meals AD, sanitation, medication, play items. Each box was time-stamped. Tracked. Logged. This wasn't chaos. This was methodical. Organized. But it was the third room, the final room, that changed everything. Because that's where they found them. Ellie and Caleb. Alive. But pale. Thin. Unmoving. They didn't speak when officers approached. They didn't cry, or scream, or reach out. They didn't even seem surprised. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, like dolls set out for display. Caleb's eyes were glassy. Ellie's were vacant. She clutched a composition notebook to her chest, fingers trembling. A detective gently knelt down. "Are you okay?" she asked. Ellie blinked. Then whispered. Are we allowed to come out now? That one sentence made every hair on every arm stand upright. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Trained. Practiced. As if there were rules. As if someone, or something, had conditioned her to ask for permission. Medical teams escorted the children out. Slowly. Carefully. They were malnourished, dehydrated, and anemic. Caleb had bruising on his forearms. Ellie's fingernails were filed down almost to the skin. Neither child had been reported missing. No Amber Alerts. No prior complaints. From the outside, they had simply vanished into their own home. Back inside the basement, officers continued searching. Hidden behind a false wall, constructed from painted drywall and mounted on hinges, they found a small control room. 2 monitors. A hard drive array. A microphone panel. The monitors showed live feeds from the cameras in the house. One in the nursery. One in the master bedroom. One in each hallway. One, inexplicably, in the basement itself, aimed directly at the children's rooms. The system had manual override. Which meant someone had been watching. Someone had been controlling it. On the desk was a printed schedule. Hour by hour. 6 a.m. Wake up. 6:15 a.m. Morning affirmations. 6:30 a.m. Light therapy. 7 a.m. Breakfast, meal B. 7:30 a.m. Writing session, Freedom Journal. 8:30 a.m. Silence hour. 9:30 a.m. Obedience test, level 2. The list went on. Rigid. Clinical. Disturbing. And then came the audio files. Hundreds of them. Labeled by date. Each one no more than 90 seconds. The first few were unintelligible. Static. But soon, voices emerged. Voice of a man. Caleb, what do we say when the light goes out? Child's voice, weak. We go still and we don't speak. Man. And when do we speak? Child. When the light returns, and you say it's time. As investigators reviewed footage and listened to recordings, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Lisa was there. She visited the basement daily. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with Richard. In one recording, she reads a story to the children. In another, she brings Caleb a toy car and says, "Only if you pass today's test." The tests were psychological. Sometimes physical. Most were cruel. One involved placing Ellie in the dark for hours, alone, to test her resilience. Another required Caleb to stay completely still, while a recorded baby's cry played for 20 minutes straight, to simulate discipline under stress. What was all this for? And why? In the days following the discovery, theories exploded online. Reddit threads. TikTok sleuths. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes. Was this some kind of experiment? No fingerprints on the basement locks. No recent financial transactions. His phone? Missing. His car? Gone. His company keycard? Last used 4 days prior, to enter a facility, but not to leave. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. It took days before Ellie spoke again. In the hospital, under watch, with therapy dogs and gentle music playing in the background, she finally said something. To a nurse, in the middle of the night. "He made us choose," she whispered. "Choose what?" the nurse asked. Ellie didn't blink. Which one of us deserved the light? As detectives continued piecing together the control room, decrypting files, tracing power sources, cross-referencing audio with home automation logs, they discovered something far more chilling than what had already been found. A second basement. Hidden beneath the first. Accessed through a trapdoor under the storage shelves in room 2. When they opened it, they expected more supplies. Maybe an escape tunnel. What they found instead was a chair, bolted to the floor. Leather straps on the armrests. Electrodes on the headrest. A small monitor beside it. It was labeled Seat of Correction, L3. No one spoke. Not for a full minute. Because it was clear now. This hadn't been spontaneous. This hadn't been a breakdown. This had been a design. The basement of 22 Birch Hollow Lane wasn't just a hiding place. It was a system. A soundproofed vault, sealed from the outside world. Every surface lined with acoustic foam. Every corner wired with surveillance. There were no windows. No light except artificial. No clocks. Time, inside that place, had no meaning. And that was the point. It wasn't just confinement. It was conditioning. In the far corner of the hidden control room, behind a locked cabinet, investigators found them, dozens of tapes. VHS, camcorder mini DVRs, even a few micro SD cards cataloged in index boxes. Each one labeled by hand. White stickers. Bold black marker. Names. Dates. Durations. Tape number 01, Ellie, Obedience Level 1, Initial Conditioning. Tape number 14, Caleb, Meal Resistance Drill. Tape number 26, Ellie and Caleb, Sibling Simulation Failure. Tape number 35, Isolation, Double Lockdown. And on it went. Each recording showed the children, often alone, sometimes together, being guided through a series of strange, ritualistic obedience drills. One involved standing completely still for over 90 minutes. No talking. No blinking. A red light in the room served as a cue. If they moved before it turned off, the drill restarted. Another involved repetitive recitation of rules. The light is safety. The dark is correction. Father knows the way. We obey to survive. Punishment for failing the drills was always the same, silence. No one screamed. No one hit them. But the children would be separated. Placed into small, pitch-black compartments hidden behind false walls in the basement. Each one padded, sealed, monitored by thermal cameras. The longest confirmed isolation period? 26 hours. Lisa appears in over 60% of the footage. Sometimes, she brings food. Sometimes, she bandages Caleb's skinned knee. In one recording, she sings Ellie to sleep on the floor of her cell. Cradling her. Whispering lullabies. But in other videos, her demeanor is cold. Clinical. Robotic. Tape number 23 shows her reading the Obedience Creed to the children like a schoolteacher might read multiplication tables. You are safe when you obey. You are pure when you are quiet. You are closer to God when you endure. Her tone doesn't waver. Her face shows no emotion. In that moment, she's not a mother. She's a function of the system. And the system had no space for compassion. But Richard? He was different. He didn't appear in most of the videos. Rarely spoke. But his voice, always behind the camera, was unmistakable. Calm. Precise. Devoid of rage or warmth. In one tape, Ellie is tasked with building a safe fort, using blankets and PVC pipe. She struggles. Caleb tries to help her. Richard's voice cuts in from behind the camera. No help allowed. Survival is individual. Ellie, begin again. The structure collapses a third time. Caleb begins to cry. Obedience cannot exist where emotion is unchecked, Richard says. The camera zooms in on Caleb's face. He doesn't stop crying. But he does stop moving. Then came tape number 43. Found at the bottom of the stack. slightly warped. Timestamped 3 days before Lisa was found on Interstate 5. The footage begins with the camera being set down on a table. The frame is crooked, blurry, but the audio is clear. Richard's voice. This is the final protocol drill. Full pack simulation. 6:30 a.m. execution. Light on. The camera autofocuses. We see the children. Lisa stands beside them, holding a clipboard. Her mouth is tight. Her eyes red. She doesn't look at the children. Richard continues. Ellie. Begin the safety prayer. Ellie closes her eyes and begins reciting in a flat voice. Light above us, light within. Keep us pure and free from sin. Obey the rule, complete the test. And in the light, we'll finally rest. Caleb joins in, slightly off rhythm. The camera zooms in again. Lisa speaks for the first time. You may proceed to departure phase. The children nod. They turn. They walk toward the far wall of the basement, where a large wooden cabinet is bolted shut. Richard's voice, soft, but unmistakable. We'll see who remembers the rules, when the dark returns. The children step inside. The cabinet door begins to close, and then static. A full 13 minutes of white noise. When the feed resumes, the basement is empty. The children are gone. Investigators immediately combed the cabinet area, and what they found added another layer of horror. The cabinet wasn't just a cabinet. It was a concealed pass-through. Behind it, a crawl space. Narrow. Claustrophobic. Leading to a sub-basement bunker, previously undetected. Inside, 2 more backpacks. A lantern. Bottled water. A box of protein bars. A note. Scrawled in pen. When the world ends, only the obedient survive. But there was no sign of the children. No footprints. No hair. No fingerprints. It was as if tape number 43 was the last record of them. Theories flooded in. Some believed Lisa had finally broken, that she'd used that morning to sneak the children out, setting them free before sacrificing herself on the highway. Others were convinced Richard had moved them, taken them to an unknown location, perhaps one of several properties he'd secretly purchased under a shell company in rural Oregon. But one theory chilled detectives the most. That the children were still inside the house. Hidden in a compartment they hadn't yet found. Sealed away again. Obedient. Waiting for the light to return. Just like they'd been taught. While the search continued, Lisa remained hospitalized. Her condition was classified as post-traumatic dissociative state, but that wasn't the whole story. She wasn't catatonic. She was coded. She spoke in patterns. Cycles. As if reciting scripts. One day, during a psychiatric evaluation, a specialist handed her a child's drawing found in Caleb's backpack. Lisa stared at it for 3 minutes before whispering. He made me choose the test. The garden or the pit. When asked what that meant, she looked up and said, I wanted the garden. I wanted them to grow. Another time, she was shown a still from tape number 43. She didn't blink. Then murmured. If obedience leads to safety, what happens when safety is a lie? An international manhunt began. Interpol notices. Surveillance at airports. Financial assets frozen. Nothing. Richard Whittaker had vanished completely. No credit card activity. No cell pings. Not even a burner phone trail. Only one clue was ever found. 2 weeks after Lisa was hospitalized, a small envelope arrived at Grace Assembly Church. No return address. No postage. Hand-delivered. Inside was a memory stick. And a single note, typed. Tell them I succeeded. Tell them the experiment proved the theory. The memory stick was encrypted. Federal agencies are still working to break it. Security footage from a bank ATM, dated 2 days before Lisa's breakdown, showed Richard withdrawing $800 in cash. He looks different. No glasses. Shorter hair. Wearing a hat and carrying a duffel bag. He doesn't look at the camera. He doesn't smile. But when he turns to walk away, he passes a little girl. Maybe 6 years old. She glances at him. He pauses. Then hands her something, a folded piece of paper. She shows it to her mother. The mother throws it away without reading it. Dumpster footage later recovered the note. It read, "Light follows structure. Chaos is just a form of disobedience." It's been 8 months. Lisa remains in a private psychiatric facility. Her custody of Sophie has been revoked, and Sophie now lives with Lisa's sister in Colorado. Ellie and Caleb? Still missing. Despite hundreds of tips, search parties, cadaver dogs, sonar scans of nearby lakes, nothing has been found. The home at 22 Birch Hollow Lane has been sealed. Sold at auction to an anonymous buyer. Locals say the new owners refused to enter the basement. As for Richard Whittaker, no one knows if he's alive. But there are whispers. In Spokane, a woman claims she saw him at a hardware store. In Idaho, a family reported a drone hovering over their cabin, with a camera attached. It broadcast the words, "Training Phase Beta," before crashing. None of these have been confirmed. But one thing is certain. The light never came back on. Richard Whittaker disappeared the same day Lisa was found, barefoot and bloodied on Interstate 5. At first, police thought he might be a victim himself, missing, kidnapped, or worse. But deep down, no one really believed that. Because men like Richard don't disappear by accident. 6 days after Lisa's hospitalization, a hiker near Mount Hood National Forest stumbled upon an abandoned 2017 Volvo XC90, gray, dirt-splattered, tucked behind a utility shed just off a remote service road. It was Richard's. The interior was clean. Almost too clean. No fingerprints. No blood. No personal effects, except for 3 things. A stack of children's drawings, hand-labeled with dates and what appeared to be scores. A black, password-protected external hard drive. A handwritten note, folded in thirds and tucked into the glove compartment. The note read, "Clean slates start with sacrifice. You only reset what you're willing to erase." The signature was just a symbol, a triangle with a vertical line splitting it down the middle. No name. No date. But the handwriting matched Richard's journals found back at the house. This was no longer just a local investigation. The hard drive was immediately sent to the FBI's cybercrime unit in Quantico. It took 6 full days to crack the encryption. What they found wasn't just incriminating. It was philosophical. And terrifying. Thousands of documents. Journals. Video logs. Behavioral charts. Diagrams of the human brain annotated with moral judgment scores. But most disturbing of all, a sprawling 84-page manifesto titled, "The Discipline Doctrine: How to Build an Obedient Family for the Collapse." Page 3. The world has failed. Not politically. Not economically. Morally. A generation obsessed with self, ego, distraction. Children don't need freedom. They need purpose. Page 19. Obedience is not control. Obedience is survival. If they can follow rules in the silence, they can survive the noise of collapse. Page 42. Each member of a family must be cleansed of external programming, friends, media, pleasure. From that blank slate, we rebuild. Page 70. A father does not love passively. A father prepares his children to endure, even if they must hate him to survive. The drive was more than writings. It contained video logs. Dozens of them. Richard, alone, speaking into a mounted webcam late at night. In one, he explains obedience drills, in scientific terms, measuring cortisol levels in children before and after social deprivation. Another discusses theory testing, involving prolonged exposure to artificial darkness. But the most unsettling video was time-stamped 3 months before Lisa's escape. Richard sits in front of a whiteboard covered in lines and flowcharts. His voice is calm, measured. Lisa is beginning to doubt the process, he says. She has not yet accepted that pain is part of purification. She still clings to the old world's morality, softness, compromise, maternal sentiment. He taps a marker on the whiteboard. If she breaks before protocol day, the experiment will be incomplete. I may have to proceed without her. When the FBI confronted Lisa with the manifesto and the tapes, she didn't deny them. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She whispered, "I know." Her initial interviews with state psychiatrists had painted her as confused, fragmented, dissociated. But under federal interrogation, she was eerily lucid. She admitted to knowing, to participating, to agreeing, at least at first. At first, I believed him, she said. The world did feel broken. Kids glued to screens. Parents exhausted. Nobody listening to each other. Richard said structure would save us. And I thought, maybe he was right. She said it started small. Bedtimes. Screen limits. Meals scheduled to the minute. Then the tests began. Lights out for an hour. No talking allowed. Rewarded with a gold star. The kids thought it was a game. But it escalated. Sudden noise drills. Withholding meals for rule breaches. Assigning point deductions for showing fear. Lisa told herself it was training. Discipline. That she was building resilient kids. She said she stayed because she was afraid. Afraid of what Richard might do if she left. Afraid of losing her children. Afraid he might be right. But she also admitted to something more honest. I liked the quiet, she confessed. The house was so still when they obeyed. Forensic psychologists were divided. Was Lisa a victim of coercive control? Or a co-conspirator in psychological abuse? Her medical history revealed no prior mental health diagnoses. No delusions. No personality disorders. But stress, isolation, and prolonged exposure to ideology, especially within closed systems, can break anyone. One expert called it intellectual Stockholm syndrome. Another said, she wasn't brainwashed. She wanted it to be true. Because the alternative was facing the horror of what she was allowing to happen. That's the question that still haunts Cedar Grove. Teachers noticed changes in Ellie's demeanor. A pediatrician flagged Caleb's declining weight. But Lisa always showed up, with a soft voice, a binder of health records, and the smile of a mother who just wanted what's best. Neighbors noticed the kids had stopped playing outside. But this was suburban America. Everyone minds their own business. One parent even commented, I thought they were just strict. Like, old school strict. I didn't think they were torturing them. But in hindsight, it was all there. The silence. The obedience. The invisible line that kept everyone from looking closer. And then, there was Sophie. Too young to participate in the drills. Too young to remember. But Lisa's confession revealed a horrifying truth. He had a plan for her too, Lisa whispered. He called it Phase Delta. Said she'd be purest, the one born into obedience. The nursery had hidden sensors. White noise generators designed to trigger sleep associations. Even the lullabies Lisa sang were composed by Richard, structured with subliminal phrases. The first one, discovered on a hospital recording, had the following lyrics. Close your eyes and still your breath. Obey the light, avoid the death. Quiet minds and silent feet. Only the good ones ever eat. Found in a burnt notebook beneath a floorboard in the nursery. The last page, scrawled in frantic handwriting. He wants to bury them in the dark and say it's salvation. But I heard Caleb whisper last night. He said he missed the sun. The sun. That's when I knew I had to get them out. Investigators believe Lisa drugged Richard's evening tea, a mild sedative found in her system. Enough to knock him out. She dressed the children. Packed the bags. But something went wrong. She tried to smuggle Ellie and Caleb out through the crawlspace. But Richard woke up. There was a struggle. Sophie was left in the crib, intentionally, or in the panic, no one knows. Lisa ran. She didn't make it far. By the time she reached Interstate 5, she was bleeding, disoriented, and alone. What happened to the children in those final moments, no one knows. Despite national exposure, the search for Ellie and Caleb continues. The FBI used ground-penetrating radar to scan the entire Mount Hood area. Drones. Helicopters. Forensic cadaver dogs. Nothing. No bones. No blood. No sightings. Just one final clue. A park ranger, 2 months later, reported finding a spiral pattern of stones arranged near a creek deep in the forest. In the center, a laminated copy of the safety prayer, weighted with a rock. The ranger thought it was part of a scavenger hunt and threw it away. But when the description reached investigators, they sent a team to the site. The spiral was gone. Only the rocks remained, scattered now. And beside them, wedged between roots, a child's sock. Gray. Size small. Some believe Richard is still out there. That he took the children, started over somewhere off-grid, and continues his experiment. Others believe the children escaped during the chaos. That Lisa may have led them just far enough into the woods before collapsing. One theory, more disturbing than the rest, suggests that Ellie may have led Caleb to hide, not out of fear, but out of obedience. That the drills worked. That the safety prayer became scripture. And that they are still waiting, hidden, silent, still. Until the light returns. We like to think monsters come with fangs and claws. That evil is loud, and messy, and obvious. But sometimes, evil looks like order. Sometimes, it wears a pressed shirt. Labels its containers. Packs nutritious meals. Sings lullabies. And sometimes, it believes it's saving you. It ended not with an arrest. Not with a chase. Not even with justice. It ended with a hiker, and a smell he couldn't explain. Weeks after the last known lead, after the media frenzy faded and the Reddit threads went quiet, a hiker wandering a disused trail in Columbia River Gorge came across something odd, a patch of earth, recently disturbed. No wildlife. No foliage regrowth. Just silence. He thought it was nothing. But something pulled him back, that old, primal instinct that something isn't right here. He dug with a stick. Then his hands. Just a few inches down, he hit plastic. And then bone. Police arrived within hours. A full forensic team began processing the scene. 2 child-sized remains. DNA confirmed it within days. Ellie and Caleb Whitaker. Their bodies were curled together. Caleb's arm was draped over his sister's shoulders. Both were wrapped in what appeared to be a single sleeping bag. The kind sold in bulk military surplus stores. A laminated sheet was found tucked near Ellie's feet. "We obeyed. Please bring the light." The coroner's report changed everything. Cause of death, hypothermia. No trauma. No drugs. No binding. No visible signs of violence. But the timing? Estimated time of death, nearly 6 months before Lisa was found on the highway. 6 months. That meant Lisa had been living in that house, knowing. Walking past their empty rooms. Making breakfast. Updating Sophie's sleep schedule. Filming baking tutorials for her forgotten blog. Raising a baby in the same home where her other children lay buried in the woods. When the truth surfaced, the world paused. News outlets called it the silent mother case. Talk shows debated whether Lisa was evil or broken. Commentators called her everything from a victim of psychosis to a child killer hiding behind grief. But the facts were immutable. She had known. She had continued to feed Sophie. Decorate for Christmas. Smile for photos. With her other 2 children dead, not lost, not taken. Dead. And not only did she say nothing. She waited. Lisa Whitaker now lives in a high-security psychiatric facility outside Salem, Oregon. Her diagnosis: dissociative psychosis with delusional coping structures. Her days are quiet. Routine. Like they always were. Meds in the morning. Therapy twice a week. Monitored phone privileges. No mirrors allowed. But sometimes. She talks. To therapists. To herself. To cameras. And when she does, she says the same thing, over and over. They're not dead. They're just waiting. One interviewer asked her what she meant. Lisa tilted her head. Richard said the flesh is just a phase. The light brings the real life. He'll bring them back when it's time. To this day, Richard Whitaker remains a ghost. No confirmed sightings. No digital footprint. No financial activity. Interpol flagged a possible facial match at a monastery in Slovakia, but it turned out to be a misidentified tourist. Another possible match in Argentina was just a conspiracy theorist with a YouTube channel and a beard. Some believe he died in the woods. That he never made it out after abandoning the children. Others insist he planned his exit long before Lisa's breakdown, that he's overseas, rebuilding. Recruiting. Watching. The hardest theory to stomach? That he's in plain sight. At a campground. A tech job. Maybe even a church. That he's smiling, polite, well-read. That he waves at his neighbors and volunteers at his daughter's school. And no one knows. Because Richard didn't look like a monster. He looked like a father. Sophie Whitaker, the last surviving child, lives in Colorado with Lisa's older sister. She's just turned 3. According to child welfare reports, she's healthy. Sweet. Developmentally average. But quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. She doesn't cry when she scrapes her knees. Doesn't flinch at loud noises. Doesn't speak unless spoken to. And she hates the dark. At night, she sometimes sits up in bed and whispers something over and over. Her aunt recorded it once. A soft chant. Obey the light, avoid the death. Obey the light, avoid the death. They don't play lullabies in that house anymore. After the final autopsy reports, after the news cycle turned to the next tragedy, the Whitaker house was bought at auction by a development firm. The first contractor refused to enter the basement. The second claimed his dog wouldn't go near the property line. Eventually, the house was demolished. Where it once stood is now a flat lot. Fresh sod. Real estate signage reads, "Build your dream home here." But no one has. Not yet. Neighbors report flickering porch lights near midnight. Motion sensors triggered with no one there. Strange interference on baby monitors. And then there are the whispers. On windless nights, when everything is still, some say they hear it, a soft voice, repeating. Begin the safety prayer. In a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, in 2018, the residents of Greenfield Oaks Apartments had a routine. A rhythm. Familiar hellos, dog-walking nods, the hum of lawnmowers on Sundays. Nothing out of place. That is, until he moved in. Unit 3B had been empty for months. Then, one October morning, a man in his early 40s, lean, polite, and eerily unmemorable, moved in. The leasing office only had the name, Daniel Walters. He didn't decorate his balcony. Didn't attend the HOA meetings. He nodded but never smiled. But he paid his rent early. Never complained. And so, he faded into the background like a ghost in plain sight. Until the smell started. It began subtly. Just a whisper in the hallway, faint, like old garbage, or maybe a forgotten takeout box. Tenants assumed it was something simple. Temporary. The building was old, after all. Old buildings creak. They leak. They smell. But then it got worse. The odor thickened, like syrup made of rot. It clung to your clothes. You didn't just smell it, you tasted it. Mrs. Henley in 3A was the first to knock on Daniel's door. Twice. Once on a Friday evening, then again the following Sunday. No answer. Just silence on the other side of that burgundy door with the dented peephole. That Monday, the maintenance guy, Tommy, was sent up to investigate. Tommy was a 62-year-old former plumber who never backed down from a clog or a critter. He joked his nose had retired from smelling decades ago. But when he reached the third floor, even he gagged. He knocked. Called out. Nothing. So, he opened the utility panel to check the HVAC vents. Maybe a dead raccoon. Stranger things had happened in Greenfield Oaks. Once, a squirrel chewed through an entire phone line. Another time, an entire beehive was found inside a dryer vent. But this? This was different. The moment he cracked open the panel, the smell punched him full in the face. It was stronger near Daniel's unit. Decaying. Wet. Chemical. Something was wrong. Tommy didn't wait. He called the landlord, and by noon, property manager Diane, efficient, unsentimental, perpetually holding a clipboard, was on the phone with the police. They arrived that afternoon. 2 officers in pressed uniforms with that, "we're sure this is nothing but protocol," attitude. They knocked, waited, then used a master key. What they found inside 3B wasn't a body. Not exactly. The apartment was immaculate. No furniture, no decor. Just one folding chair in the middle of the living room. No TV. No photos. The kitchen had 1 plate, 1 cup, 1 fork. The fridge was empty. The freezer contained a single-gallon-sized bag of ice. The air inside was freezing cold, every window shut, AC blasting full power. But the smell, somehow, was even worse inside. The officers made their way down the hall toward the bedroom. And that's when they found it. The walls. The walls were covered in newspaper. Floor to ceiling. Not taped, but pinned, each page meticulously straight, not overlapping. No visible pattern, just chaos. New York Times next to National Enquirer next to a faded sports section from 2003. Some were yellowed with age. Some had red circles drawn around seemingly random words. Others had large X's in thick black marker, covering entire articles. The carpet beneath the pins was spotless, almost suspiciously so. And in the closet, behind a false wall of newspaper, they found a large plastic tub. It wasn't locked. Just sitting there. Inside? Bleach. Several empty bottles. Gloves. A box of surgical masks. And a small, rusted handsaw. But no blood. No fingerprints. No name tags. No notes. Nothing identifiable. Daniel Walters was nowhere to be found. For days, the building buzzed with theories. Greenfield Oaks wasn't the sort of place that made headlines, until now. The local news ran the story as a developing situation, carefully tiptoeing around the facts they didn't yet have. Suspicious materials found in local apartment, the anchor said, trying to sound calm. The residents were not calm. Children weren't allowed to play outside. Pets were kept indoors. One woman on the second floor moved out that very week. She told her neighbor she'd rather commute from Gresham than live next to a possible Dexter. And yet, the investigation hit a wall. No criminal charges. No active crime scene. The police couldn't prove anything illegal had occurred. The tub and its contents were considered suspicious but not definitive. No missing persons matched Daniel Walters. No fingerprints matched any database. Then, someone checked the leasing records. That's when things got weird. The application for 3B was complete, the bank account used to pay rent. A series of prepaid cards, all registered under fake addresses. Even the social security number was one digit off from an 89-year-old man in Florida. Whoever had moved into 3B had constructed a complete, functioning identity out of paper, plastic, and precision, and then vanished. Diane, the property manager, was rattled. She'd processed Daniel's application herself. She remembered his eyes, gray, maybe? Or hazel. She couldn't be sure. He'd spoken softly, politely. Seemed almost shy. Said he worked remotely in data analytics. A job vague enough to avoid suspicion. But now, she couldn't remember what his voice sounded like. Or whether he'd shaken her hand. Or what car he drove, if any. And the security cameras? Here's the kicker. They didn't work. Hadn't in months. A budget issue. On the list, the HOA kept saying. So there was no footage of Daniel moving in. No video of him coming or going. The only proof he'd ever existed was his signature on a lease and a single blurry photo on the application, barely visible under a poor quality scan. Diane kept looking at that photo. The man staring back looked normal. Boring. So boring it was almost intentional. Greenfield Oaks became a different place. The friendly nods disappeared. People locked their doors during the day. Mail was double-checked for tampering. Someone started a Facebook group called Oaks Watchdog Society. The theories flew fast. He was a serial killer, waiting for a victim. He'd already killed, and 3B was his cleanup zone. He was CIA. Or FBI. Or hiding from them. An alien. A robot. A ghost. A drifter. A professional cleaner for the mob. But the most chilling theory came from a 9-year-old girl named Annie, who lived across the hall. One night, weeks after Daniel had disappeared, she told her babysitter. "I still see him sometimes." The babysitter froze. "You mean on the news?" Annie shook her head. "No. I mean in the hallway. Sometimes he waves. But he doesn't blink." 2 weeks earlier, across town, 28-year-old Kayla Monroe, a night shift nurse, had been reported missing. Last seen leaving St. Anne's Hospital after her shift at 3:12 a.m. Security footage showed her pushing through the glass doors, tugging her hoodie over her scrubs, her hair tied in a messy bun, earbuds in. She waved to the night guard, crossed the lot under the flickering yellow lights, and then, like mist in the early morning air, she was gone. No struggle. No signs of distress. No other figures on camera. Just Kayla walking into darkness. Her car, a silver Honda Civic, was found 3 days later. Abandoned in a strip mall parking lot. Not a scratch on it. No signs of theft. No fingerprints. No DNA. No fast food wrappers, no coffee cups, no clutter. Nothing to suggest a person had even sat inside. It was too clean. Detective Lorenz, the lead on the case, described it like this. It was as if someone had reassembled the car from memory. All the right parts, but the soul was missing. Inside the trunk, nothing. Not even the emergency kit. The only clue? The radio had been left on. A static hum, set to a frequency that didn't exist in the Portland area. Like someone had turned the knob slowly, deliberately, just past the edge of the dial. Detectives were baffled. But here's the twist. Kayla wasn't just another missing person. A year earlier, she'd been featured on the local news. Nurse subdues violent patient, the segment had gone viral on local stations. She had remained calm while a 6'4" man in a psychotic episode swung wildly at staff. Kayla had ducked, tackled, and restrained him until help arrived. Her training in crisis response saved 2 nurses from serious injury. Her photo was everywhere for weeks. Bravery. Poise. Grace under pressure. And, apparently, someone had been watching. When Kayla vanished, the case was treated like a priority. Posters went up. Tips poured in. Candlelight vigils were held on the hospital lawn. But nothing concrete emerged. Then came a phone call. An anonymous tip, from a male voice, calm, unhurried. You're looking in the wrong places. The nurse isn't lost. She's with someone. Someone who knew what she did. Someone who watched her stop the chaos, and wanted to see what she'd do when she couldn't. Click. No number. No trace. The call lasted exactly 13 seconds. Detective Lorenz replayed it over and over. The cadence. The cold confidence. The voice had no urgency. No threat. Just a flat declaration. And a faint echo, like the caller was in a large room, or possibly underground. The call, she was single. Lived in a small one-bedroom near the Columbia River. Kept to herself. No history of violence. No stalking complaints. No shady exes. A few old flings, but nothing recent. Not even a dating profile. But someone had been paying attention. A neighbor reported seeing a man outside her window about a month before she vanished. Said he was just standing there, facing the building. Like he was watching the brick, not the people inside. No one else saw him. No cameras covered the alley. Just shadows. And then there was the notebook. Found inside Kayla's apartment, on her nightstand. Half full. Mostly grocery lists, shift notes, and doodles. Except for one page. Scrawled, jagged handwriting, not hers. I wonder how long you'll stay calm. I wonder what it'll take to make you scream. That page was torn halfway, like it had been added later, or stuffed inside. The paper didn't match the notebook. It was thinner. Yellowing. From an old pad, maybe. No fingerprints. But someone had left it there, in the most intimate space of her home. 2 days after the notebook discovery, Detective Lorenz got a tip from his colleague at Missing Persons. They'd been cross-referencing recent disappearances in the greater Portland area and stumbled on something strange. A pattern. 3 other women had gone missing in the past 18 months. All within a 15-mile radius. All between the ages of 26 and 32. All working night shifts. One was a waitress. Another, a janitor at the local university. One had been a night librarian at a private archive downtown. All vanished between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. None of them had been high-profile cases. No press coverage. Minimal follow-up. Families thought they'd just left town or fallen off the grid. But the similarities were too clean. When detectives reopened the files, they noticed something else. In each apartment, a single item had been left that didn't belong. In the waitress's apartment, a folding chair in the middle of the living room. Identical to the one found in Daniel's unit. In the janitor's place, a gallon Ziploc bag in the freezer, filled with perfectly square ice cubes. In the librarian's apartment, a pinhole in the drywall, behind a stack of books, leading to nothing, but surrounded by aged newspaper clippings pinned to the back of the shelf. All subtle. All deniable. All deliberate. And now, with Kayla missing, the pieces were no longer isolated. Someone was staging scenes. Not just cleaning up, curating. When Detective Lorenz learned about Daniel Walters, the name on the lease at Greenfield Oaks, he paid a visit. The manager, Diane, handed over everything she had. The lease. The blurry photo. The prepaid transactions. And a detail that made the detective's blood run cold. Daniel had moved in 4 days after Kayla went missing. Lorenz returned to Unit 3B. The crime scene team had cleared it weeks earlier. But he needed another look. The air was stale now. Less of the chemical rot, more of that sickly nothingness you get in untouched rooms. He stood in the middle of the living room, eyes scanning the bland carpet. The white walls. Then he walked into the bedroom. Still covered in newspapers. Hundreds of them. Carefully pinned. And behind the false panel in the closet, he noticed something strange about the plastic tub. He crouched. The inside edge of the lid had indentations, tiny ones. Like fingernail scratches. As if someone had tried to open it, from the inside. But that wasn't possible. Was it? Around this time, residents of Greenfield Oaks began reporting something else. Not smells. Not shadows. Sounds. Scratching. Light tapping. Muffled, rhythmic thuds, especially at night. One tenant claimed she heard a woman's voice, faintly, sobbing. Maintenance checked the walls. Pipes, they said. Or rats. Always rats. But then a plumber found something odd, a gap between the drywall and insulation in Unit 3C, just one unit over. Inside the gap, a hidden vent shaft. Sealed off decades ago. It ran straight behind the wall of Unit 3B's closet. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a tenant. It wasn't even Detective Lorenz. It was the mail carrier. Janine Miller, a 5-year USPS veteran, wasn't one to jump to conclusions. She knew every mailbox on her route by name, practically every dog, and who was most likely to try tipping her with homemade banana bread. She'd been delivering to Greenfield Oaks for years. She knew the rhythms. Who got junk mail? Who still paid bills by paper? Who subscribed to what catalogs? And she knew that Daniel Walters never picked up his mail. Ever. By the 3rd week, his mailbox looked like it had developed gout. Stuffed. Overflowing. Credit card off, it was the trash. She passed the row of green dumpsters behind the complex every morning. Most tenants didn't even bother bagging things properly. Soggy pizza boxes, overripe fruit, Amazon boxes stuffed with styrofoam. But Daniel's trash? always in black contractor bags. Tied tight. Double knotted. Janine happened to see him once, just once, disposing of one. Early morning. Hoodie up. Gloves on. Moving like he was taking out radioactive waste. What caught her eye, though, wasn't the bag. It was what slipped out of the top when he dropped it. A clear plastic sheet, like the kind you'd see in a painter's studio, or a crime scene. And something else. A used hospital ID badge. She couldn't see the name, but the layout was unmistakable. The laminate. The clip. She made a casual report to the leasing office. Nothing official. Nothing urgent. Just one of those, hey, probably nothing, but just FYI, kind of notes. The kind people write before someone says, I should have said more. 3 days later, Tommy the maintenance guy was called to Unit 4B, just above Daniels. The tenant, a man in his 60s named Howard, reported a leak in his bathroom. Said water was dripping slowly from the light fixture. Smelled funny. Tommy arrived with his usual kit and a half-eaten Twix in his back pocket. He didn't expect much. Probably a loose pipe, maybe condensation from the AC. He unscrewed the light cover and almost gagged immediately. Not water. The droplets falling onto the tiles were brown, viscous, and stank like spoiled meat and ammonia had a baby. Worse? There was movement. Tiny, writhing things. Maggots. Tommy stepped back, looked up, and saw something that would haunt his dreams forever. The light fixture's rim was crawling with them. Wiggling up through the hole. From inside the ceiling. He dropped his tools and ran out. This time, the police didn't hesitate. They returned with gloves, respirators, and a hazmat team. Detective Lorenz was called directly. Unit 3B was officially declared a hazardous site. They sealed off the hallway. Cleared the floor. Crime scene tape went up for the first time in Greenfield Oaks history. And what they found inside 3B this time would take days to process. Investigators had already searched 3B weeks earlier, but only at surface level. This time, they had cadaver dogs. Infrared scanners. Moisture meters. The whole forensic circus. It didn't take long. Behind the folding chair in the living room, where a small rug had once sat, they found it. A false floor panel. No more than 4 feet by 4 feet. Carefully cut. Seamless. Underneath? A cavity. 3 feet deep. Lined with thick plastic sheets, some stained, others clean. And inside that cavity? A metal box. Locked. The kind you'd expect to find in a military bunker, not a one-bedroom apartment. It was bolted to the floorboards. The team worked for 2 hours to extract it. When they finally pried it open, they found a pair of surgical gloves, blood-streaked and inside out. A USB drive, labeled only with a single letter, K. A small notebook, filled with names, dates, and codes. And worst of all, a clump of hair tied with a blue rubber band. Kayla's favorite color was blue. The USB drive was rushed to the forensics lab. It contained only 2 files. One was a text document titled, K_observations.txt. The other, a video file. No title. No timestamp. Just a video, 4 minutes and 17 seconds long. They started with the text file. It read like a log. Cold. Clinical. Dated entries. All about Kayla Monroe. Subject continues Route B to garage. 3:14 arrival average. No variation. Observed subject restraining violent male. Calculated hand pressure at 70 psi. Controlled aggression noted. Subject remains unaware of surveillance. Responds to stress with tactical calm. Exceptionally rare. There were 42 entries in total. Each one more obsessive than the last. One line simply read, "I wonder if she dreams of the same darkness I do." Then they played the video. It opened with static. Then flickered into an image of a mirror. Reflected in it, a woman. Tied to a chair. Gagged. Breathing fast. Her eyes wide. Desperate. Her face, unmistakably, Kayla Monroe. The camera never moved. It didn't have to. The scene was shot from behind a wall mirror with a pinhole lens. A live feed. Kayla looked directly at it. Not screaming. Just staring. Her expression somewhere between fury and pleading. And then, at the 4:03 mark, a man's voice, off-screen. "You stayed calm longer than I expected." Cut to black. Back at the station, Lorenz sat in silence, watching the last second of the video loop. He'd seen awful things before. Victims. Scenes. Crime. But this? This was something else. Someone had orchestrated this. Documented it. Curated it like an art exhibit of human suffering. And worse? He was still out there. Because every fingerprint on the box. Wiped. Every trace of DNA. Contaminated. Every code in the notebook. Encrypted beyond recognition. Daniel Walters, the man who never blinked, never spoke, never smiled, had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. When police entered Unit 3B with a warrant, they expected a body. What they found was worse. The living room was spotless. Again. The folding chair, gone. The rug, gone. The freezer? Empty, save for a single cube tray of clear ice and a lone label, Tuesday. The air was cold, humming with the buzz of the air conditioning set unnaturally low. The whole place smelled, sterile. Not clean. Sterile. Like a place that feared even the memory of life. The team split up. Detective Lorenz walked toward the bedroom, knowing what he'd seen the first time was only scratching the surface. In the bedroom closet, forensic tech scanned the drywall and quickly picked up inconsistencies. Tap here, solid. Tap there, hollow. The wall wasn't a wall. Behind it, a hidden hinge, painted to match the interior. It popped open with a soft click. What they found behind it stopped them cold. A makeshift padded cell. 4 feet wide. 8 feet long. 6 feet high. Lined with foam insulation boards, wrapped in old bed sheets and duct tape. The padding had been stapled directly to the drywall. The staples were rusted. A few had fallen to the ground. Inside the room. A thin foam mattress. A plastic bucket in the corner. Several broken zip ties still fastened to a loop in the wall. And on the floor, a half-eaten protein bar, molded at the edges. Blood smeared across the walls. Faint handprints. Some in patterns like someone had tried to claw upward. Or inward. As if looking for a door that didn't exist. In the far corner, one chilling detail. Scratched into the foam, over and over, a single word. Stay. It took only a few hours for forensics to come back with results. Blood on the foam. A match for Kayla Monroe. Fingerprints on the walls and bucket. Also hers. Food wrapper. The same brand she was known to eat on night shifts at St. Anne's Hospital. 1 protein bar. 1 woman. At least 10 days. She'd been kept alive, in that tiny room, drugged, restrained, watched. But where she went next, or if she ever left. That answer was still missing. The tech team found it hidden under the loose panel beneath the kitchen sink, wrapped in 3 layers of plastic, sealed with wax. Daniel's laptop. Custom built. No brand markings, Modified hardware. Encrypted to a degree rarely seen outside of intelligence agencies. But the strange part? It was already open. As if he'd wanted them to find it. No password screen. No login wall. Just one folder. Her. Inside, 812 photographs. All of Kayla Monroe. Some were zoomed in, her adjusting her rearview mirror. Others from a distance, her entering the hospital, buying coffee, checking her mailbox. Dates stretched back nearly 11 months. Almost every single day. Meticulously catalogued. Each photo had a time code. Weather conditions. Camera angle specs. Some were taken through glass. Some from rooftops. One even from inside a laundry room, facing the alley behind her apartment. The level of planning was inhuman. One image stood out. A close-up of Kayla asleep. Not through a window. Not through a lens. Taken from inside her bedroom. The laptop had no internet access. No saved logins. No traceable accounts. Just one offline directory with encrypted notes. But the encryption wasn't consistent. It was sloppy in places, almost like he'd changed methods halfway through. Digital forensics broke through one file, just one. A document titled eventualities.docs. It contained a table. Names. Descriptions. Psychological traits. Sleep patterns. Routines. Vulnerabilities. Kayla's name was highlighted. Next to it. Type 4, Controlled Empath. Resilient. Prime candidate for Sequence 2. Under it, a series of words. Observe. Isolate. Break. Measure. Sequence. Not plan. Not experiment. Sequence. This wasn't random. Detective Lorenz went back to his whiteboard. Now there were 5 names. 5 missing women. 5 night shifts. 5 untouched apartments with eerie fingerprints left behind. But Kayla's case was different. She'd been found, sort of. Traces of her were found. Her time in that hidden room now mapped out by evidence and horror. And Daniel? He wasn't hiding anymore. He was curating. Crafting a narrative. One file, one photograph, one blood smear at a time. But why? Then came the strangest break. You're not asking the right question. You want to know where she is. But you should be asking. What has she become? D. Detective Lorenz stood in the Greenfield Oaks parking lot, staring up at Unit 3B. He lit a cigarette, a habit he'd quit 5 years earlier. 100 questions raced through his mind. But one kept coming back. Not how Daniel found Kayla. Not how he took her. Not even what he did to her in that cell. But why Kayla? Why her? There were others on the list. Other women. Other victims. But Kayla had been the only one who stood up, publicly, to chaos. She didn't flinch. She didn't run. She fought back. Was that it? Did Daniel see her strength as a threat? Or was it something else? Was it a challenge? The detective's phone buzzed. An alert from the precinct server. Facial recognition match. Location, Redmond, Washington. 200 miles north. Footage from a gas station security camera. Timestamp, 2:43 a.m. The image, blurry. Black and white. But unmistakable. Kayla Monroe. Or someone who looked exactly like her. Face thinner. Hair chopped short. Eyes vacant. She didn't look like a victim. She looked disconnected. Daniel Walters wasn't real. That name, the man, the ID, the signature on the lease, was fiction. A disguise. A mask worn by someone with no interest in being remembered, only feared. When the prints from the apartment were finally analyzed, matched, and cross-referenced through federal archives, the truth came out. Daniel Walters was actually Elliot Granger. A former paramedic. Once licensed. Once respected. Until 2013. That's when everything began to unravel. Back then, Granger worked in Sacramento. Night shifts. Trauma calls. High pressure. Fast decisions. He was known for being calm in chaos. Until one night, he wasn't. A patient, unstable, aggressive, non-compliant, reportedly spat in his face. What happened next was unclear. Witnesses gave conflicting stories. But what couldn't be denied was that the patient left the ambulance with a shattered orbital socket and a fractured jaw. Elliot claimed it was self-defense. But the court didn't agree. He lost his license. His job. His credibility. And then, he disappeared. Dropped off the grid. No tax returns. No digital footprint. No credit score. But he hadn't stopped working. He just changed careers. When the truth broke, the trial that followed exploded across headlines. Paramedic turned predator. The man in Unit 3B, who is Elliot Granger? And most chilling of all, the list. Because what they found in Elliot's rented storage unit, buried inside a locked Pelican case, chilled even the most seasoned investigators. A hard drive. 256 gigabytes of handwritten notes, observation logs, photographs, and a spreadsheet. A simple file. Titled sequence_list.xlsx. It had 12 names. Each with a date. A photo. A psychological profile. Each name belonged to a woman. Each worked in healthcare. Each had once shown exceptional calm under pressure. Kayla? She was number 5. Investigators combed through the list. The first 4 names? All missing. 2 in Oregon. 1 in Idaho. 1 in Montana. All unsolved disappearances. All nurses. All night shift workers. And all vanished within the past 4 years. Each one had a folder on Elliot's hard drive. Each folder had photographs, timelines, behavioral analysis. Even notes about stress reactions. Subject number 2 cried after 14 hours. Silent resistance observed. Impressive. Subject number 4 attempted negotiation. Calm voice. Failed to detect secondary camera. Each woman had become an experiment. And only one had made it out alive. Kayla. She was found wandering the side of a rural road just outside Redmond, Washington. Disoriented. Dehydrated. But alive. Physically, she bore no fresh injuries. But psychologically, she was fractured. Shattered in ways that don't show up on MRI scans. Her testimony became the backbone of the prosecution's case. She spoke clearly. Calmly. Like someone trying to anchor herself to reality by using her voice as rope. He watched me for months. He knew what kind of cereal I ate. What side of the bed I slept on. He'd mapped out my fear before I even knew I was afraid. She described the room. The foam-padded silence. The protein bars. The constant cold. And one phrase he'd repeated to her, night after night. You don't have to die to disappear. You just have to become unremarkable. The case went to trial in late 2019. Public defenders didn't stand a chance. There was too much DNA from the apartment. The management company says it's under renovation. That it's being remodeled for future tenants. that it'll be available, soon. But locals know better. Longtime residents whisper about it behind locked doors. Because no one stays in 3B for more than a few weeks. The walls creak at odd hours. Light bulbs blow out. Tenants say the room feels wrong, too cold, too still. And sometimes, just sometimes, they say you can hear something. Knocking. Not loud. Soft. Rhythmic. From inside the walls. The video fades to a static shot of the apartment door. Unit 3B. Peeling paint. Rusting hinges. A dented peephole. No name on the mailbox. No welcome mat. Just silence. And then, just before the screen cuts to black, 3 slow knocks. Tap. 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 Kayla Monroe now lives under a new name. She works days, keeps her windows locked, and sleeps with the lights on. She still doesn't know how long he was watching her before he made himself known.
In the sleepy town of Millfield, Pennsylvania, the winter wind had a way of whispering secrets, half-heard stories buried beneath snowbanks in time. Life moved at the pace of a slow church hymn. The loudest sound most evenings was the creak of porch swings, or the rhythmic clink of a kid's bike chain spinning down a frostbitten sidewalk. This wasn't the kind of place where bad things happened. At least, not the kind that made national headlines or Netflix docuseries. But all of that changed on December 14, 2017, when Elise Brenner vanished. 17 years old, straight-A student, the kind of girl who got thank you notes from teachers for being a joy to have in class. She wasn't the popular girl, not quite. She floated on the periphery, respected, even liked, but not always understood. Elise had a quiet intensity, a restless curiosity, and a camera that never left her side. She had a fascination with forgotten things. Abandoned places, rusting buildings, photos where the light filtered through broken glass like stained windows in a cathedral. Elise could see the beauty in rot, the story in silence. Her Instagram, with just under 1,200 followers, was filled with moody shots of boarded-up train stations, hollowed-out farmhouses, and whatever else Millfield's decaying skeleton had to offer. But that Thursday night, when she told her mom she was heading out to photograph the Glenridge Asylum ruins, something about the way she said it felt off. Not the words, those were normal enough. It was the way she grabbed her coat like it was armor. The way she hesitated before she said, "I'll be back by 9. She never was. First, nobody panicked. Not really. Elise was a responsible kid. Her mom, Rachel Brenner, assumed maybe she had lost track of time. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she was getting just one more shot. Elise's usual excuse when she was chasing the right light. But by 10:30, the unease turned sharp. Cold. Rachel called. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Still nothing. By midnight, the fear had crystallized into action. Rachel called 911. The Millfield Police Department wasn't exactly built for this kind of thing. The last big case they'd handled was a tractor theft in 2015. Missing persons. That was usually someone's cousin who forgot to tell their parole officer they'd moved to Erie. But this? A 17-year-old girl. Gone. Without a trace. In December, Officer Greg Trammell was first on the scene. He took the report, asked the routine questions, and logged the call as a possible juvenile runaway. Rachel exploded. Elise doesn't run away. She doesn't sneak out. She doesn't lie to me. If she's not home, something's wrong. Still, the narrative took hold. She was a teenager. Teenagers do unpredictable things. She probably needed space. She'd be back by morning. Only she wasn't. By sunrise, a team of volunteers had gathered. Neighbors, teachers, classmates. They scoured the snowy fields near Glenridge. They combed the half-frozen creek beds, walked through woods where bare branches clawed at coats and hats like skeletal fingers. But they found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no broken branches, no camera, No Elise. Then came the first chilling twist. Elise's phone records, obtained 2 days later, didn't show her going to Glenridge. The last ping from her phone wasn't from anywhere near the asylum. It came from a cell tower in Lockwood, a small town 20 miles east. A town Elise had no known connections to. No friends there. No relatives. No photo locations tagged on her Instagram. Just a rural, wooded town most Millfield kids only heard about when they took the wrong bus during football season. And then, nothing. No more pings. No text messages. No social media activity. The phone went silent. Permanently. At this point, the case exploded beyond Millfield. Local media picked it up first. A quiet honors student vanishes en route to a haunted asylum. It had the kind of eerie symmetry journalists salivate over. Then national outlets latched on. The Millfield Mystery, they called it. Elise's face was suddenly everywhere, on missing posters, on morning shows, on Facebook groups where armchair detectives dissected every blurry photo and timeline. People were captivated, not just by her disappearance, but by how little sense it made. There was no sign of a struggle, no witnesses, no trace of Elise's camera or backpack, no ransom notes, no cryptic social media posts. The day she disappeared, Elise had attended school like normal. She submitted an essay in AP Literature titled The Elegy of Forgotten Places. Her teacher, Mr. Halvorson, said it read like a goodbye. That sent a new wave of speculation rippling through the case. Was this a suicide? A staged disappearance? Or was someone else writing Elise's final chapter? Detective Marla Vasquez was brought in from Harrisburg. Known for solving a string of cold cases involving missing teens, she had a reputation for cutting through red tape with surgical precision. She wasn't swayed by emotion. She was methodical, clinical, borderline robotic. And she hated media attention. Vasquez took over the investigation 12 days after Elise went missing. Her first move? Pull every digital file Elise had ever touched. Emails, texts, search history, GPS logs, socials, cloud backups. What she found only deepened the mystery. On the morning of her disappearance, Elise had Googled Glenridge Asylum Blueprints. Best time to shoot at dusk December PA. What's east of Millfield? That last one raised eyebrows. Why would she Google that if she was supposedly headed west to Glenridge? Even stranger, Elise's final known photo, taken at 4:42 p.m. and auto-backed up to her cloud, showed a long, two-lane road cutting through woods, snow dusting the branches, and a dark figure, blurry and half-obscured, standing at the road's edge. No one recognized the location. It wasn't Glenridge. It wasn't Millfield. And Elise had captioned the photo. There's something wrong with the light here. That's when theories began to multiply like mold in the dark. Some said Elise had stumbled onto a secret she wasn't supposed to see. An illegal dump site, a drug lab, a cult. Others claimed the photo had supernatural qualities. Reddit threads speculated wildly. A shadow person, a glitch in reality, a ghost of Glenridge. One user zoomed in and claimed the figure had no face. Another swore they saw a second figure, reflected faintly in the snow. The FBI was notified. They were less interested in ghosts and more interested in patterns. And sure enough, Elise wasn't the first. Records unearthed by Vasquez uncovered 2 other missing persons cases in the Lockwood area over the past 15 years. Both were teens. Both vanished in winter. Both had been en route to somewhere else when their signal was last traced near Lockwood. Neither were ever found. But here's where it gets chilling. Each of those cases had a similar digital artifact, a final photo uploaded minutes before vanishing. In one, a girl named Stephanie Hale, aged 16, had uploaded a blurry shot of trees in heavy fog with the caption, "I think I'm being followed." The other, a boy named Jared Kelman, 18, had posted an audio clip on his Instagram story of wind, and what some say is whispering underneath it. It was tagged simply, "Near Lockwood." Both photos vanished along with them. No bodies, no explanations, just 2 data points lost in time, until Elise. Vasquez began to wonder, was this part of a pattern, or something worse? Back in Millfield, Rachel Brenner was drowning in grief and guilt. She refused to take down Elise's posters. She slept in her daughter's room. She answered every spam call hoping it might be the one. The media hounded her. Conspiracy theorists sent her maps. Psychics mailed her hand-drawn sketches. She started receiving strange letters. Typed, "No return address," each one postmarked from different towns. The first letter read, "She went looking for ghosts, but something found her first." Another, a week later, "Three roads meet where the trees lean left." Police were stumped. The handwriting was machine perfect. No prints, no DNA, but the implication was clear. Someone knew something, or someone wanted them to think they did. Then came the break. 2 weeks after Elise vanished, a local hunter in Lockwood stumbled across a torn piece of red fabric near an old fire road. Under it, a cracked camera lens. It matched Elise's Canon. The SD card? Miraculously intact. Vasquez reviewed the contents personally. Hundreds of images. Some familiar Millfield rooftops, broken glass, long shadows. But toward the end, the photos changed. The last 10 shots were rapid fire, taken within 30 seconds. A dense grove of trees, a blur of movement, something black in the distance. A closer view, trees leaning unnaturally. The ground, Elise's shadow, long and distorted. The figure closer, hunched. The same figure now looking at the camera. A pair of headlights in the distance. Snow-disturbed footprints. The camera tilted mid-fall. Black, partial hand in frame. And then nothing. What happened to Elise Brenner? That's the question that will haunt Millfield for generations. Because just when investigators thought they were circling in on the truth, on whoever or whatever waited for Elise in those woods, the case took one final, horrifying turn. On March 2nd, 2018, nearly 3 months after she vanished, someone logged into Elise's Instagram, just for a moment. A single post appeared on her story. A photo never seen before, blurry, dim, almost sepia-toned. It showed what looked like a room, small and windowless. One chair, one light bulb, and the caption, "This isn't over." 3 weeks after Elise Brenner vanished, the case had gone cold. Leads evaporated. Tips led nowhere. The town of Millfield slowly settled back into uneasy silence. For all the press, posters, and social media blitzes, Elise's trail had iced over, both literally and figuratively, until a mail carrier named Darla Pruitt did something most people wouldn't. She paid attention. It was January 4th, 2018, 3.5 feet of snow on the ground and more falling. Darla had worked her Lockwood route for 12 years. She knew every porch mat, every lazy Labrador, every widow who'd send her off with a thermos of cocoa. So when she noticed that the house at 117 Hollow Pine Road hadn't been shoveled, not once, not even on Christmas, her antennae went up. No tire tracks, no footprints, no garbage bins dragged to the curb, no lights, no movement. And yet, for the past 2 weeks, someone had been collecting the mail. She called it in. The welfare check happened later that afternoon. Officer Will Connolly and Deputy Shannon Rourke rolled up the long, winding drive in a whiteout storm. The house was a 2-story colonial, modest, faded yellow paint curling like old wallpaper. The front porch sagged. The mailbox overflowed with envelopes and yellowing catalogs. But what struck them immediately was the cold. Not the outside cold, the cold inside. Because when they knocked, no answer. When they opened the door, no resistance. And when they stepped inside, every window was wide open. The wind howled through the house like it had been invited. There was no furniture, no dishes, no art, no rugs, no electronics, just blank walls and echoing floors, as if someone had exorcised the entire interior of personality. All that remained was one item in the dead center of the living room. Camera, mounted on a tripod, still recording. Connolly and Rourke stared at it like it might bite. It was a vintage model, early 2000s Canon Mini DV camcorder, the kind used for weddings and amateur ghost hunts. It had been running long enough that the tape had auto-looped and re-recorded over itself. But it was on. Battery pack wired into a wall socket. Red light blinking. A single cable led to a small monitor. The officers looked. The screen showed the empty room, identical to the one they stood in. Same angle, same shadows, just one difference. In the recorded footage, there was a person standing in the corner. The figure wasn't facing the camera. It stood near the far wall, unmoving, hooded, slight frame, no visible face, just there. Rourke tapped the monitor. Static buzzed for half a second. When the image returned, the person was gone, and on the floor where they'd been, Polaroid, real world, right in front of the camera, like it had been left just moments before. Connolly bent to pick it up. His gloved hand shook. The Polaroid showed a girl. Long dark hair, pale face, dazed eyes. She was sitting on a chair. Concrete walls. One hanging light bulb above. It matched the room posted to Elise Brenner's Instagram story. Same shadows, same bulb, same expressionless stare. But this wasn't a still frame. This was a print, a physical copy, a message. The house was sealed within the hour. Crime scene tape went up. Forensics were called in. Every square inch was dusted, swept, UV scanned. No fingerprints, no blood, no signs of forced entry, and no trace of Leonard Voss, the man who owned the house. Who was Leonard Voss? On paper, Leonard Voss was ordinary. Too ordinary. A 64-year-old antique dealer, originally from Lancaster County, who'd relocated to Lockwood in 2009. He kept a small storefront on Main Street called Voss Antiquities, a dusty little cave of Victorian furniture, war memorabilia, and unsettling porcelain dolls. He was well-spoken, quiet, formerly married, no children, clean record, paid taxes, kept to himself. But Voss hadn't been seen since December 12th, 2 days before Elise went missing. His shop was locked, his utilities unpaid, his phone disconnected. Neighbors said they hadn't noticed he was gone. Leonard was the kind of man who could be invisible in a crowd of 3, one said. But then Vasquez got hold of his inventory logs, and something stood out. In October of 2017, Voss had sold a collection of vintage cameras to a collector in Ohio. Every one accounted for, except one, a Canon Mini DV camcorder, the same model found in the Hollow Pine house. Then came the discovery in the basement. Behind a panel in the far wall, forensics found a crawl space, a claustrophobic tunnel just 4 feet high, lined with crumbling insulation and the scent of mildew and copper. At the end of the crawl space, a locked iron hatch. No key, heavy rust, bolted from the outside. Once forced open, the hatch revealed a tiny, windowless chamber. Cement floor, soundproofed walls. Inside, a folding chair, a bare mattress, a single light bulb, and on the wall, scratched into concrete, "See what I see," etched beneath it over and over a single symbol. The room was empty. No blood, no hair, no trace evidence. But it was cold, unnaturally cold. Forensic thermometers registered it at 18 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the rest of the basement being a steady 41. The theory? A soundproof holding cell, built by Voss, used for who knows how long. And the worst part? The camera in the living room? Its lens had a direct line of sight to the hatch, like it had been watching for something to come out. Back at Police HQ, Vasquez watched the recovered camcorder footage for hours. Most of it was mundane. Empty room, shifting light patterns, snowflakes blurring the windows. But in 2 separate clips, the same hooded figure appeared. Once at 3:17 a.m. on December 15th, the night Elise disappeared. And once more at 3:17 a.m. on December 28th. Each time they entered the frame from the left, stood silently, then moved out of view. Like clockwork, like ritual, the media frenzy reignited. "The Lockwood Dungeon," headlines screamed. "YouTuber discovers clues in Voss video" trended for a week. One TikTok user reverse-engineered the frequency of the camera timestamps and claimed the footage contained embedded Morse code, spelling the word resolve. Another claimed that if you played the audio backwards, you could hear a girl whispering, "It's underneath." Whether coincidence, pareidolia, or something more sinister, the hysteria became fuel. But Vasquez didn't chase ghosts. She chased Voss. Interpolated security footage from a gas station in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, 75 miles north, picked up a man resembling Voss 2 days after his last known sighting. He was wearing a cap, sunglasses, and a scarf. He bought a burner phone and paid in cash. Then he disappeared again, but his purchase triggered a federal trace. And what they found sent the investigation into overdrive. The burner phone had only ever made one call, to a voicemail inbox in Vermont registered to a shell company, Crooked Hollow Holdings LLC. And that company had rented 3 different storage units across 3 states in the last 2 years. One in Lockwood, one in Clark Summit, one in Stowe, Vermont, all under the name E. Voss. The Lockwood unit was opened first. Inside, more cameras, stacks of unlabeled tapes, and dozens of Polaroids, each showing different young women sitting in the same room Elise had appeared in. Same chair, same light, same vacant stare. Some looked terrified, others dazed. Drugged? None identified, except one. In the back of the pile, Stephanie Hale, missing since 2010. And just behind her photo, a receipt, dated December 5th, 2017, for one disposable phone, shipped to a P.O. box in Millfield, Pennsylvania, addressed to 8 Brenner. So now the case had changed again. Elise didn't stumble into something by accident. She had been targeted, watched, studied, possibly lured. The FBI, now fully embedded in the investigation, issued a federal warrant for Leonard Voss. But the more they uncovered, the less sense any of it made. A man with no criminal record, a house designed like a trap, a camera that watched nothing, a room that remembered everything, and a girl still missing, somewhere, out there, or beneath, or worse, still watching back. In every horror story, there's a point of no return. For the case of Elise Brenner, that point came on January 9th, 2018, inside a climate-controlled storage unit in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania, rented under a fake name, paid in cash, registered to no one. But the name listed on the lock agreement? Voss. By now, authorities knew Leonard Voss wasn't just a quirky antique dealer with an affinity for Victorian furniture. He was something else entirely. Voss had built a secret museum of the macabre. Inside the unit, lit by a single overhead bulb and a backup generator, they found a vault of horrors. Stacked milk crates, dusty boxes, and filing cabinets that stretched back decades. The temperature-controlled room sat at a steady 62 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for preserving fragile media. But this wasn't furniture. This wasn't heirlooms. This was a library of obsession. The label on the first box read, Category, Unsolved, Female, Northeast U.S. Subsection, Cold Cases, Media Artifacts. Inside, obituaries clipped from newspapers, police sketch composites, disposable cameras with undeveloped film, bits of clothing, scarves, gloves, earrings, each individually bagged and cataloged, and VHS tapes, dozens of them, old, degraded, but neatly labeled. Each tape bore a handwritten title. Some examples: A. Warner / Session 6. S. Hale / Session 3. J. Kelman / Pre-Session. Unknown, Gas Station Girl. And then Elise / Session 4. Timestamp, December 16th, 2017. 2 days after Elise disappeared. Detective Vasquez was the first to view it. Alone. The footage began with static, gray waves rolling like a television trying to remember a dream. Then a flicker. Then an image. A camera angle facing a cement room. Cold. Bare. Same room from the Polaroids. A girl sat in a chair, hands tied behind her, eyes covered with black gauze, barefoot, shivering. The grainy date in the corner read, December 16th, 17:03:14 a.m. And the girl, it was Elise. Her voice came through, faint and hoarse. Please, the ice. Can you stop the ice? She said it over and over, not screaming, Not sobbing, pleading, as if she were freezing from the inside out. Vasquez rewound the tape, watched it again. The phrase repeated 8 times, each time more desperate. Please, please stop the ice. It's in my throat. Then silence. For 47 minutes, Elise didn't speak again. Just the sound of her breath. Unsteady, rhythmic, like she was waiting for something. The end of the tape was worse. At the 1 hour 4 minutes and 22 seconds mark, a sound emerged. Metal scraping, like a heavy latch being pulled. And a voice, male, calm, almost clinical. We're ready for the next layer. Then a whirring noise, like machinery powering on. The camera cut to black. Session over. Authorities were stunned. This wasn't a kidnapping. This wasn't random. This was ritualistic, documented, deliberate. And Elise wasn't the only one. Further into the storage unit, detectives discovered a master index, a binder marked, cataloged personalities. Inside, each missing person had their own file, handwritten notes in meticulous script, psychological profiles, behavior logs, session timelines, audio transcript excerpts. It was as if Voss wasn't just collecting victims, he was studying them. Elise's entry was 4 pages long. A sample note: subject exhibits adaptive detachment, resists visual stimuli, responds to auditory discomfort, especially irregular frequencies. Refer to Session 3 for vocal modulation test. Session 4 will commence full exposure to L pattern. Another excerpt, underlined twice: light manipulation triggers panic response. Useful. The unit also contained a locked metal trunk. When opened, it revealed a stack of burned CDs labeled Echo Sessions, microcassette tapes in red sleeves, a sealed envelope marked for the archivist, and one final item, a child's sketchbook. On the first page, in faded pencil, things that are cold but not ice. Inside, pages and pages of surreal drawings. A girl inside a snow globe, a house buried upside down in snow, an eye with frost crawling over it. And on one page, in crayon, the thing in the wall watches when you're asleep. Meanwhile, Voss remained missing. Interpol confirmed that Leonard Voss hadn't crossed any borders. But get this, the name Voss turned up in a psychiatric registry from 1954. Not Leonard, but Edward Voss, admitted to Glenridge Asylum at age 13. Diagnosis: compulsive mnemonic retention, obsessive documentation, chronic disassociation. Treatment record ended in 1960. Listed as released to guardian custody. But no guardian was ever named. And here's the kicker: Glenridge Asylum officially shut down in 1961 after a fire consumed the East Wing. The cause? An explosion in the records archive. Detective Vasquez now had a theory. Leonard Voss and Edward Voss were the same person. And what Voss had been doing for the last 5 decades. Preserving, not people, not memories, but the moment of disappearance. That razor-thin line where a person stops being who they were and becomes something else. It wasn't just abduction. It was transformation. And the ice? It wasn't weather. It was part of the process. More tapes followed, each more unsettling than the last. Sessions where victims were asked to recite strange phrases, repeat numbers, react to sudden bursts of light. Session 7 with Stephanie Hale featured her whispering over and over, "It's colder when I remember." Jared Kellman's Session 2 included this chilling dialogue. "You said there were others. There are always others. Where are they? They're underneath. Under what? Us. So where was Voss? And more importantly, was Elise still alive? Because while most tapes showed subjects descending into silence and stillness, Elise's Session 4 ended with her looking directly into the camera, eyes uncovered, and saying, "You're not him." Then came the twist no one expected. At 2:06 a.m. on January 12th, the Millfield Public Library received an email. Subject line: archive submission / Session 5. No body text, just a link. The IP address was untraceable. The link self-destructed after one view. But the video was real, and it showed Elise, alive, no longer bound, sitting in the chair, staring directly at the camera, and whispering, "He left, but the house remembers." Then static, and a final frame, the symbol again. In every mystery, there comes a moment when the hunter becomes part of the hunt. For Millfield, that moment arrived not with a scream, not with a new tape, but with a fingerprint. One fingerprint, pulled from the Canon camera in the Hollow Pine Roadhouse. It didn't match Voss. It matched someone else. Detective Mason Keene, lead investigator, respected officer, and now a suspect. To the public, Keene was the face of the Elise Brenner investigation. Calm, stoic, the type who showed up early, left late, and said very little in between. Reporters called him unflappable. Parents called him reassuring. Colleagues called him a bit of a lone wolf. But what they didn't call him was transparent, because Keene had been hiding something. Several somethings, in fact. Starting with this, he'd quietly reopened 5 cold cases linked to the Hollow Pine area. Cases the department had long since closed. Cases they didn't know he was working on. Cases involving missing girls, icy nights, and one common denominator, Leonard Voss. When Vasquez confronted him, Keene didn't deny it. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. "It was never just Elise," he said. "Not to me." That's when he told her about Sarah. Sarah Keene was Mason's younger sister, 16 years old when she vanished in February 1998, while walking home from a winter study group in Scranton. No witnesses, no trace, just her backpack, found half buried in snow, 2 blocks from a condemned building slated for demolition. That building once housed archived medical records from Glenridge Asylum. Authorities at the time chalked it up to a runaway. Mason, just 22 then, was a cadet in the police academy. He never believed the official story, especially when, a year later, a VHS tape was mailed anonymously to his parents' house. No return address. On it, a girl who looked like Sarah, blindfolded, sitting in a chair, saying one phrase over and over, "It's quieter when I'm cold." That tape was lost in an evidence shuffle during a departmental move in 2003. But Keene never forgot it. He buried the memory behind a badge, behind the daily ritual of order and justice. But when Elise vanished, when the ICE references surfaced, it was like the world cracked open again. And underneath it all was Sarah. Keene began investigating Voss on his own in early 2017. He accessed sealed psychiatric files. He cross-referenced antique purchases with missing persons cases. He traced cash-only P.O. boxes, watched the old Voss antiquities store for days at a time. And when the Hollow Pine property went cold in the snowstorm, he was the first one there, before the department, before Vasquez, before the mail carrier even made her call. That's how his fingerprint ended up on the camera, because he'd touched it, watched it, studied it. "I didn't tamper with the scene," he told Vasquez. "I documented it. I just didn't tell anyone." Which begged the question, was Mason Keene obsessed or involved? The department was divided. Some believed Keene had crossed ethical lines, but only out of desperation and trauma. Others believed it was worse. What if Voss hadn't been working alone? What if the obsession files weren't just his creation? What if there had been an accomplice all along? Someone within law enforcement. Someone who had access to victims, to case files, to department blind spots. Someone like Mason Keene. Then came the audio tape, found tucked behind a false panel in Voss's second storage unit in Stowe, Vermont. Labeled in red Sharpie, Session 0// The Initiator. The tape opened with a young woman crying, followed by 2 voices. One was Voss, the other was harder to place, smoother, quieter, measured. Here's a transcript of the final exchange. Female voice: "Please, I told you what you wanted." Male voice 1: "Voss, it's not about what we want." Male voice 2: "It's about what we remember." Voss: "They never understand until they're inside the snow." Female: "Please." Male voice 2: "Don't beg. You'll forget this part soon. Click. The recording ends. But analysis confirmed something else. The second male voice was a near match for Mason Keene. Keene denied everything. He claimed the voice was doctored, a setup, a manipulation. Vasquez wasn't sure what to believe, because here's the unsettling part. Keene's personal file had been flagged twice in the last year for unusual access patterns. He had looked up Elise Brenner's school schedule 2 weeks before she disappeared. He had visited the Glenridge Asylum ruins alone, and he had requisitioned infrared surveillance gear, the same kind Voss used without official authorization. Still, no concrete evidence tied him directly to Elise's abduction. And then came another twist. A survivor came forward. Her name was Maren Lowe, now 34, once a missing person from Connecticut, age 17, vanished for 2 weeks in January 2007, reappeared with no memory of where she'd been. Her story had been dismissed at the time, chalked up to drugs, trauma, dissociation. But when she saw the news coverage of Elise Brenner's case, it all came rushing back. She described a cold cement room, a chair bolted to the floor, a single light bulb, and a camera that never blinked. She also described 2 men, one old, one younger. The younger man, he wore a badge on his belt. I don't know if it was real, but he said he was with the investigation, said I was part of a memory test, that I wouldn't understand now, but I would soon. When shown photos of both Voss and Keene, Maren hesitated, then pointed at Voss, and slowly at Keene. I think it was both. Suddenly, the case was no longer about a missing girl. It was about a system, pattern, a ritual passed down or maybe shared. One based not in lust, not even in power, but in memory, preserving it, twisting it, freezing it. Vasquez now faced an impossible choice. Pursue Voss, still missing, still ghost-like, or arrest her fellow officer. So far, no warrant had been issued, but Internal Affairs opened a sealed investigation into Mason Keene. He was placed on administrative leave. His final words to Vasquez? "You're looking at this wrong. Elise wasn't taken. She was chosen. And it's not over." And maybe he was right, because the night Keene was suspended, a new photo appeared on Elise's dormant Instagram. It was grainy, dark, low light, but unmistakable. It was Keene, standing alone in a forest, bare trees behind him, snow falling. Caption: "We all returned to the cold." Then the account deleted itself. By late February 2018, the world had begun to move on. The headlines faded. The hashtags slowed. Elise Brenner's face still hung on telephone poles in Millfield, but the paper was water-streaked, the ink running down like tears. Internally, the investigation had stalled. The leads had gone cold. Vasquez was chasing ghosts, and the public was losing interest, until one last package arrived. Unmarked, no return address. It was dropped off at the Millfield Police Department front desk just after midnight. No one saw who delivered it. Surveillance cameras? Glitched. Inside the package, 3 VHS tapes, 1 note, 6 words, typed on yellow paper. "This is the final memory." One tape stood out. Label: Elise // final. Vasquez personally loaded it into a secure player, flanked by FBI techs. The footage began like the others. Same room, same light, same chair. But Elise looked different. Calm, still, composed, like she wasn't being held, like she wasn't afraid, like she had become part of whatever this was. She stared just left of the camera lens. Her voice was low, barely a whisper. He said, he was born in room 117. Then silence. Not the kind where nothing is said. The kind where everything is. Room 117. No such room had ever appeared in Glenridge Asylum's floor plans. Vasquez had checked the blueprints herself. But the moment that name hit her ears, something inside her snapped into place. Not logic, not evidence, just instinct. 2 weeks later, the demolition of Glenridge Asylum began. A decades-long community eyesore finally coming down. Contractors prepared to level the final structure, the East Wing, gutted by fire in 1961. But when they brought down the wall between rooms 116 and 118, they found something that shouldn't have been there. A bricked-in space. No door. No window. Just a sealed chamber like a memory someone wanted erased. They called Vasquez in. When the wall was broken, floodlights revealed a chamber roughly 11 feet by 11 feet. Cement walls, faint scorch marks, and on the back wall, a single word etched in soot. C. The floor was covered in Polaroids. Exactly 27. Each one depicting a different teenager. All missing. All cold case victims from surrounding states. Each photo taken from the same angle, straight on, slightly tilted. Like an eye that had never blinked. But the final photo, that's what made Vasquez stop breathing. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't faded. It was new. The timestamp was 2 days ago. The girl in the photo stood outside the Hollow Pine Roadhouse, wearing a red scarf, face tilted just slightly toward the lens. And in the bottom right corner of the photo, a gloved finger, still visible. Authorities scrambled. They locked down the Hollow Pine property, searched it top to bottom. Again, no signs of Voss, no signs of Keen, no signs of Elise, just a fresh set of footprints leading into the woods and stopping at nothing. Then the final twist. The second tape in the package was labeled 117 / construction footage. It showed grainy, archival black and white film. Dated 1953. Glenridge Asylum under renovation. Workers pouring cement, laying brick, framing new rooms. And near the end, the camera caught a young boy, standing in the background, wearing a coat 2 sizes too large. He stared directly at the lens, and behind him, a chalkboard that read, "Welcome, Edward. Room 117 is ready." The third tape, empty, just 1 second of black. Then a flash of a symbol which is an eye, then static. The room was sealed, the asylum site bulldozed and fenced off, but nothing official came of it. The FBI classified the findings. The Voss investigation remains open. Mason Keen still missing, neither confirmed dead nor definitively involved. The Hollow Pine house was condemned and burned in an unexplained fire weeks later. No one was seen leaving the scene. As for Elise, her whereabouts remain unknown, but across message boards, dark web threads, and encrypted forums, people claim she's still uploading photographs. Strange ones, blurry images of frost, shadows, broken mirrors, each with cryptic captions. Light doesn't forget. He's not done. They're waking up. And the most recent, room 117 never closed. And so, the case of Elise Brenner, once believed to be a simple disappearance, ends not with a resolution, but with a reopening. Because there's one detail no one can explain. The girl in the final Polaroid, wearing the red scarf, she wasn't Elise. She was someone new. And the cycle may have already begun again.
It started with a photograph. March 3, 2019. A sleepy little town tucked into northern Michigan's thick pine forests, where time seems to freeze each winter and thaw slowly each spring. The kind of place where people wave from porches, where the coffee at Marine's Diner always tastes a little burnt, and the snow plows know the names of every kid waiting for the school bus. That morning, snow fell like it had been rehearsed. Slow, poetic flakes drifting across the cobblestone paths leading to St. Luke's Church. The church itself, built in 1893, stood tall and stiff like an old man who refused to modernize. The pews creaked, the stained glass murmured in fractured sunlight, and the bell above still rang with the voice of old steel. They had gathered to say goodbye to Harold Granger, retired banker, town sponsor, husband, father, devout Lutheran, and, now, officially deceased, courtesy of a late-night heart attack in his favorite recliner with a half-glass of scotch still sitting beside him. By all accounts, it was a normal funeral. Somber but familiar. Harold had been many things: strict, conservative, blunt, but his death came as no scandal. His heart had simply stopped, like the batteries in the grandfather clock that stood in his office. Mourners shuffled in with solemn nods and fogged glasses. Family in the front. Friends in the back. A smattering of co-workers, poker buddies, and people who owed Harold small debts but came anyway out of guilt or curiosity. Pastor John McKinley stood at the pulpit, thumbing through his notes like he was stalling for a miracle that wouldn't come. Elliot Crane, local photographer and quiet fixture at town events, stood near the side aisle, Canon EOS 5D Mark IV in hand. He didn't love funerals, but they paid. People wanted clean, respectful photos. A record of goodbyes. Proof that everyone mourned appropriately. Elliot had made peace with that. He adjusted his lens and began his slow, unobtrusive circuit of the sanctuary. Snap. Snap. Widow in black. Snap. Pastor mid-blessing. Snap. Close-up of lilies draped over Harold's casket. And then he saw her. Third pew from the front, right-hand side. Sitting alone. Pale gloves, neat posture, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She looked like someone torn straight from a 1940s noir film, elegant, severe, and utterly alone. She wept. But not like the widow. Not like the children or friends. Her shoulders moved in tiny tremors, tears falling into a white lace handkerchief she clutched with gloved fingers. She made no sound, just a soft rhythm of breath like the ghost of a sob. Something about her didn't belong. Elliot snapped a photo without thinking. Then another. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. After the service, Elliot lingered. He watched as mourners filed out, exchanging muted condolences and casserole promises. But the woman in the third pew remained seated. He approached the pastor quietly. "Hey, John. Who's the woman in the third pew?" Pastor McKinley glanced over, then frowned. "I don't know. Friend of the family?" "I asked them," Elliot said. "The widow's never seen her." The kid said the same. The pastor squinted, as if trying to conjure her identity from memory. Maybe she's from Harold's past. Old flame, maybe? Maybe, Elliot said. But there's something else. She was gone. By the time Elliot turned back, the third pew was empty. No footsteps. No farewell. Just a damp mark on the wood where her handkerchief must have sat. That night, Elliot sat at his small studio/apartment above the old hardware store. The hum of a space heater blended with the occasional creak of old pipes and distant wind. He loaded the funeral photos onto his desktop, letting the whir of the hard drive fill the silence. He reviewed the shots mechanically at first. The widow's raw grief. The pastor's pained smile. The casket, polished and perfect in its stillness. And then, the third pew. He zoomed in. She was clearer now, dark curls tucked beneath a vintage hat, cheekbones sharp and ghostly pale. Her mouth was small and pursed, like someone constantly holding back words. Her dress was a deep navy, almost black, cut with an old-fashioned elegance that would have looked more at home in a silent film than a modern church. The lace handkerchief fluttered near her chin. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Something about her felt familiar. Not just in the way all grief feels familiar. No, he knew that face. He pulled up his archives, sifting through past folders, naming conventions, event dates. He stopped at one labeled, Morgan Funeral, September 2018. It was the burial of Linda Morgan, a beloved schoolteacher who'd passed after a long fight with cancer. Elliot had covered that funeral too. He scrolled through, more rapidly now. And there, standing in the back, near the final hymn, was the same woman. Same face. Same dress. Same handkerchief. She looked slightly younger, but only slightly. Her posture identical. Her presence, equally haunting. Elliot swallowed hard. He opened another folder, Wheeler Service, June 2017. This time it took longer. He went frame by frame, zooming in on crowds and corners and reflections in the stained glass. There she was again. Not sitting this time, but standing just outside the church doors, half shadowed by an oak tree. Looking in. Same dress. Same woman. 3 funerals. 3 appearances. No explanation. By Monday morning, the snow had iced over. Elliot's studio smelled like burnt coffee and second thoughts. He hadn't slept. Instead, he printed the photos and tacked them side by side on a corkboard, highlighting the woman's face in each with a red Sharpie. He hadn't done something like this since college, when he'd fancied himself an investigative journalist instead of a small-town photographer who charged $100 for pet portraits. He told himself it was probably nothing. A grief counselor, maybe. Or a religious figure who attended local services. But even that didn't hold up. She wasn't in the obituary guest books. No one remembered speaking to her. She didn't drive into the church parking lot. No record of entry. No record of leaving. Elliot didn't mean to stir things up, but the mystery chewed at him. So, he did what any sensible man might do in a sleepy town full of secrets. He told Maureen. The town's unofficial gossip ambassador raised one thin eyebrow over her coffee pot as Elliot slid the photos across the counter. That, she said, is the same woman. Elliot nodded. Maureen squinted at the dates on each photo. You think she's, what? Some kind of professional mourner? Wouldn't she be paid? Recognized? Maureen shrugged. Maybe she's just lonely. Lonely people don't hide in funeral shadows wearing the same dress for 3 years. Maureen handed the photos back and refilled his mug. Honey, in this town, that dress might be the most exciting mystery we've had since Old Man Brecker's barn burned down. That afternoon, the rumors began to spread. People called her the Mourning Woman. Others whispered she was a banshee. A ghost. Some swore she never aged. Others claimed they'd seen her once, years ago, weeping at a funeral for a child she didn't know. But none of it explained why she cried harder than anyone else. Every time. 2 weeks later, Elliot got a call from Mrs. Langford, caretaker of the town cemetery and record keeper since 1979. I think I found something you might want to see, she said. He arrived at her cottage as the sun dipped low. She wore a thick sweater and smelled of peppermint and dust. She led him to her back room, where dozens of record books lined the walls. Been digging through funeral logs, she said. Looking for unexplained guests. Anonymous sign-ins. Odd patterns. She handed him a tattered journal with careful handwriting. Look at the margins. Elliot opened the book. In the margins of at least 10 different funeral guest lists, spanning over 20 years, there was a small symbol drawn in black ink, a rose. Always in the same spot. No name. No address. Just a tiny rose. She's been coming here longer than you think, Mrs. Langford said. I found that same rose mark in a 1994 funeral log. For a man named Clifford Wren. He died in a boating accident. Elliot blinked. You think she left the mark? I don't know. But whoever drew that rose wanted to be remembered without being known. Detective Marla Bishop didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in patterns. And when Elliot Crane's body was found in his apartment above the old hardware store, camera smashed, corkboard torn off the wall, and his files missing, her instincts flared like a struck match. It was staged. Sloppy, but staged. The coroner wrote it off as an accident at first, carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty space heater, exacerbated by alcohol. But Marla saw through it before she even stepped into the room. No booze. No heater. Just one thing out of place, a photograph wedged beneath Elliot's desk, half burnt at the corner, as if someone had missed it during a cleanup. The photo was familiar. A woman. Third pew. Lace handkerchief. Same black dress. The same damn woman who'd been turning up in funerals across northern Michigan like a bad penny at a coin collector's convention. And Elliot? He'd found her. He hadn't shared it with the department, maybe didn't trust them, maybe didn't think it was big enough. But he'd shared it with someone. Maybe too many someones. Maybe the wrong one. Marla flipped the photo over. Written on the back, in Elliot's tight print. She's not mourning. She's hunting. That night, Marla sat in her kitchen with an old notebook, a lukewarm beer, and the ghost of her retired mentor whispering in her head. Some killers hide, he once said over stale donuts and cold case files. The smart ones mourn. Back then, she'd thought it was just metaphor. Now, it felt like prophecy. Elliot was no paranoid. He had a sharp eye and an obsessive streak. If he said the woman was more than a curious mourner, Marla believed him. She opened her laptop and began with the obvious, Harold Granger. Heart attack. Age 67. Clean record. Former banker. Buried with Lutheran rites and a suspiciously pristine death certificate that didn't list the minor contusions noted in the autopsy photos. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the insurance policy. 2 months before his death, Harold had filed an updated beneficiary form. That wasn't unusual. Older men adjusted their wills all the time. What was unusual was the name on the form. Clara Vaughn. Not the wife. Not the kids. His fiancée. Marla blinked, then cross-referenced the name with public records. Nothing. No social security number prior to 2015. No tax records. No driver's license. Not in Michigan. Not in the Midwest. Not anywhere. Clara Vaughn didn't exist. At least, not before Harold Granger decided to hand over $500,000 to her from beyond the grave. By the end of the week, Marla's dining table looked like a serial killer's fever dream: obituaries, printouts, newspaper clippings, catering invoices, florists' receipts, and guest logs spread in overlapping layers like forensic wallpaper. She wasn't hunting a name. She was hunting a face. And there it was again. The woman, always the same, though she changed her name like outfits. Miriam Stokes, noted as a close friend in a 2020 funeral in Traverse City. Emily Royce, signed into a guest log in Alpena. Diana Vale, listed on a sympathy card addressed to the family of a drowned contractor in Grayling. The face never changed. Not in 5 years. Always elegant. Always somber. Sometimes in a veil, sometimes not. But unmistakably her. And in 5 of those funerals, 5, the deceased men had active life insurance policies, with last-minute changes to their beneficiaries. Marla cross-checked the names. 3 of the deaths had suspicious medical contexts: a supposed insulin overdose in an otherwise healthy man with no history of diabetes, a sleep apnea incident in a guy who'd been training for a marathon, and a poisoning marked as accidental because the man had a home bar and a penchant for rare whiskeys. But all of them linked back to Clara Vaughn. Same woman. Different names. Same face. Same pattern. The medical examiner called her the next day. "Bishop, I think you were right about your photographer. What did you find? Cause of death wasn't carbon monoxide. We missed it at first because of how cold the apartment was, but there's trace amounts of ketamine in his blood. Fast acting. Knocked him out before he ever hit the ground. Time of death? Late. Probably midnight, give or take. But here's the kicker." He paused. There's no sign of forced entry. And the door was locked from the inside. Marla exhaled sharply. Someone had been there. Someone with access. Someone Elliot let in. Or someone he thought he could trust. Her mind flashed back to the corkboard. The missing files. The burned photo. This wasn't a warning. It was cleanup. She decided to visit St. Luke's Church again. The place where it all started. Snow had melted since the funeral, but the old stone chapel still looked as weathered and secretive as ever. Pastor McKinley met her at the door, glasses fogged, cardigan fraying at the elbows. "Detective Bishop," he said. "Is this about Mr. Granger?" "Sort of," she replied. "I need to see your funeral guest logs. And anything you remember about a woman sitting in the third pew that day." He hesitated. "The one who cried so hard?" Marla nodded. "That's her. She was strange. Never introduced herself. She left before I could speak with her. But I do remember her gloves. Pale, old-fashioned. Like something out of a museum." "Did she talk to the family?" "No. In fact," he frowned. "When I asked the widow if she wanted to speak with the woman, she said, and I quote, 'I thought she was one of your people.'" "Did she sign the guest book?" The pastor pulled out a small leather-bound registry. Marla flipped to March 3rd. Nothing stood out at first. Then, halfway down the page, she saw it. A single rose drawn in the margin. Same symbol Elliot had written about. Not a signature. A calling card. Marla dug deeper. She called in favors from old friends at the Department of Insurance, ran background checks on each of the 5 suspicious deaths, and even paid a dark web investigator to scrape for any mentions of Clara Vaughn or aliases connected to sudden inheritances. What she found chilled her to the bone. There were other towns. Other deaths. She wasn't just a local phantom. She was a regional one, surfacing in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania over the past 10 years. Always with a new name, always at funerals, and always with some emotional story that justified her inclusion: a forgotten college lover, a distant cousin, an old flame who'd reconnected just before he passed. And always, there was a financial transaction. Sometimes insurance. Sometimes property. Sometimes nothing more than jewelry left to her in a will hastily rewritten weeks before the death. But there were too many. And they were too perfectly spaced to be coincidence. Marla drew a timeline. The woman, whoever she was, had left behind at least 12 dead men in 7 years. And not a single police department had caught it. Because the kills were clean. Quiet. Professional. She didn't just infiltrate lives. She wove herself into them. She inserted herself into grief like an actress slipping into a well-worn role. And when it was over, she walked away. With tears. With grace. With a check. Then something changed. Marla noticed it in a small obituary from Lansing. A young man, age 34. Heart attack in his sleep. Not unheard of. But uncommon. And there, again, in the background of a photo from the wake, the woman. No dress this time. No handkerchief. She was smiling. It was the first time Marla had seen her not in mourning. Not hiding. Just smiling. Straight at the camera. Like she wanted to be seen. Marla zoomed in. Her hand was resting lightly on the arm of another man, mid-50s, athletic, with an expensive watch and the tan of someone who traveled frequently. She was already moving on. Already lining up her next performance. By the time they found her, she was living under a new name, Lillian Crest, in a hotel outside Grand Rapids. A midtown suites, the kind of nondescript business class place meant for traveling salespeople and quiet affairs. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would raise a single eyebrow. She'd checked in 2 weeks earlier. Paid in cash. Used a fake ID. No online footprint. No digital trail. And yet, she'd left something behind. Room 309. When the front desk manager opened the door for police, he said, she always seemed polite. Bit sad. But very sweet. The type you want to give a discount to. He wasn't smiling when he saw inside. The room was immaculate, but unsettling. Fresh white sheets. A faint scent of lavender. Curtains drawn just so. But on the far wall was a desk, and on that desk, a carefully arranged collage of grief. Wallets. Watches. Lockets. All belonging to men who had died under Clara Lillian's watch. Each item labeled with a tiny note: Martin, 2016, Harold, 2019, James, 2021. Some items bore intimate inscriptions: to my dearest, always and forever. Others were more mundane: a scratched-up Zippo lighter, a half-used bottle of cologne, a favorite pen. Each one placed deliberately. Reverently. Like trophies. But this wasn't pride. It felt more like ritual. Like she was remembering them in her own twisted way. In the dresser drawer, officers found a lace handkerchief, the same kind she wept into at every funeral. Next to it, a small velvet box containing 7 gold rings. Detective Marla Bishop arrived less than an hour after the scene was secured. She stood silently as the text dusted for prints. There were none. No DNA. No hair. No skin. Not a smudge on the mirror or faucet. The woman had cleaned the room like a forensic technician. Marla moved to the desk and stared at the trophies. You don't mourn 12 men and leave watches behind, she murmured. Unless you want to remember how it felt to watch them die. Then came the drawer. Locked. But not for long. Inside, tucked beneath a false bottom, was a journal, hardcover, leather-bound, with a single phrase embossed on the front in gold. To move among the grieving, you must become one of them. Marla opened it. It wasn't a diary. It was a manual. The entries were clinical. Surgical. As if written by a grief consultant with a PhD in emotional manipulation. Chapter 1, Silence is Trust. Do not speak first. Let them tell you the story. Let them pull you in. People want to believe you're hurting too. The quiet sufferer earns sympathy faster than the loud one. Chapter 2, Mirror their grief. Watch how they mourn. Reflect it. If they cry, you cry. If they go silent, you go still. Become the grief they want to see. Chapter 5, The Widow's Wardrobe. Always black. Always modest. Repeat key outfits to evoke familiarity. People remember symbols, not faces. Dozens of these. No names. No regrets. Just instructions. A blueprint for mourning convincingly, persuasively, intimately. And every single chapter ended the same way. Leave no trace. Leave them grieving. Marla's hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. This wasn't grief. It was a performance. Then came the final blow. Tucked between the pages was a manila folder labeled in her precise handwriting. Cantor, Joseph. Prospect number 13. Inside, recent photos, email printouts, a calendar with 2 dates circled in red. January 16th, first meeting. January 27th, second meeting. Dinner at Café Lizette. And then, at the very bottom, a document still warm from the printer. Marriage license paperwork. Filed in Kent County, pre-signed by Joseph Cantor. Marla scanned the top line. Applicant A, Joseph Cantor, age 78, widower. Applicant B, Lillian Crest. God, She muttered, "She's already halfway through the next one." She flipped to the next page, a life insurance pre-authorization form, unsigned but filled out. Joseph Cantor had no family left. He'd lost his wife of 52 years the previous spring. And 3 months ago, he'd posted a short message on a senior dating forum. "I miss talking to someone every day. If anyone out there just wants to share coffee or conversation, I'm around." That was it. That was all it took. Marla moved fast. She found Joseph Cantor at home, alone, in a modest colonial tucked off the edge of a snow-packed cul-de-sac. He greeted her at the door in a cardigan and slippers, squinting through bifocals. "Oh," he said. "Are you Lillian's friend?" She paused. "In a way." Inside, his living room was filled with photos of him and his late wife, trips to Niagara Falls, an old dog in a Santa hat, their 40th anniversary party. Joseph poured tea, cheerful, not suspicious. He spoke about Lillian like she was a gift. "She listens," he said. "Not many people listen when you get to be my age. But she does. She remembers things. Things I've forgotten about my wife. She even visited her grave with me last week." Marla's stomach twisted. "How did you meet?" she asked. He blushed slightly. "Online. I didn't think people actually replied to those forums. But she said she'd lost someone too. A fiancé. I suppose we connected over grief." She showed him the insurance form. His face fell. I never signed anything," he stammered. "She said we'd take things slow. That we didn't need paperwork yet." "She lied," Marla said gently. "And I'm afraid she's done this before." He looked down at his cup. "Oh," he said quietly. Then again, softer. "Oh." Marla returned to Midtown Suites the next morning. Room 309 had been sealed for evidence, but she wanted one more look. Something gnawed at her. Something that didn't fit. Why now? Why Grand Rapids? Why leave the journal behind? She reviewed the room in silence. Walked the perimeter. Studied the desk again. Then she saw it. A note. Tucked into the room Bible like a bookmark. On thick, cream stationery. Folded once, no envelope. It wasn't addressed to Joseph. It was addressed to her. "Detective Bishop. I wondered when you'd catch up. I'm not your villain. I'm their consequence. Men grieve poorly. They want replacements, not healing. They chase warmth, not wisdom. They give rings to strangers to fill the void, and I simply become what they need. They hand me their hearts. I don't steal them. Don't follow me. I'll only disappear again. But if you insist, look in obituary archives from April 2009. That's where I began. L.C." Marla read the note twice, then a third time. There was no flourish. No gloating. Just calm certainty. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. FBI profiler Nathan Kell had seen monsters before. But not like her. He read the file twice before he said a word. Pages and pages of victims, photographs of solemn funerals, grainy surveillance footage, and one grainy shot of her smiling, too perfectly, at a funeral in Lansing. She wore grief like a costume. And wore it well. Marla Bishop handed Kell a summary of what they had: aliases, insurance fraud, a growing death toll. But when she called her a serial killer, he gently corrected her. She's not a killer in the classic sense, he said. She's a relationship predator. Marla blinked. What's the difference? Kell looked up, eyes distant. She doesn't kill for pleasure. Not for compulsion. Not to watch the light leave their eyes. She kills for connection. Short bursts of intimacy. A performance of closeness so convincing, even the victims die believing they were loved. He paused, folding his fingers together. Then she erases herself. Like a ghost who never wanted to haunt, only to be missed. Kell's specialty was reverse mapping, reconstructing lives backwards. He started with her latest known alias, Lillian Crest, and tracked the digital footprints that didn't exist. That was his first clue. Most people leave echoes online. Even ghosts have IP addresses. But she left nothing. No job history. No student loans. No Facebook high school photos. She's not invisible, he told Marla. She's scrubbed. In truth, Clara Vaughn, Emily Royce, Diana Vale, Lillian Crest, none of them existed before 2015. But someone did. In a maximum security facility in Indiana, Kell found a sealed juvenile file from 2007. He couldn't get the name, but the file's notes were telling. A 17-year-old girl, arrested for identity theft and attempted elder abuse. Posed as a home nurse. Stole from a dying man. Diagnosed as emotionally disassociative, highly adaptive, socially persuasive. The arresting officer's comments stuck with him. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She asked for the patient's address so she could send flowers. The girl had vanished after a plea deal. But Kell suspected the name she used after that trial had become her first alias. And that she'd been perfecting her method ever since. Back in Grand Rapids, Kell sat in the evidence room staring at her journal for hours. Not reading. Listening. There's a rhythm to sociopathic empathy, he explained to Marla. It's not that they can't feel. They choose when to feel. Like actors. She doesn't lie with words, she lies with presence. Every tactic in her journal had the precision of a surgeon. Touch early, touch often. The hand on the wrist when they cry. The shared sigh. The tilted head. Each is a breadcrumb. Let them feel lucky. Let them think they're rescuing you. Always be just out of reach. A little damaged. A little mysterious. One entry chilled even him. When they tell you they love you, whisper it back like it costs you something. They'll treasure it more. She wasn't just playing the widow. She was playing the perfect lover, for the dying. She's addicted, Kell finally said. To what? Asked Marla. To grief, he replied. To the intimacy it brings. To the vulnerability. She doesn't get high off the kill, she gets high off the trust. Some killers needed knives. She needed eye contact. With Marla's help, the FBI linked her to 19 confirmed deaths across 7 states. Most of the cases had been closed, labeled natural causes or minor accidents. One man fell asleep in his garage with the car running. Another suffered accidental blood thinning while undergoing treatment. All of them had 2 things in common. A sudden and intense romantic connection. A woman who showed up, wept convincingly, and vanished before anyone could remember her name. Kell built a timeline. When he plotted it on a map, it looked like a constellation: Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Wisconsin. At the center? Detroit. Where her trail seemed to begin and end. Until one hotel receipt changed everything. The Midtown Suites credit card records revealed a single transaction the morning she fled room 309. Air Canada. One-way ticket. Detroit Metro to Montreal. Date, April 2nd. It had been purchased at a nearby kiosk using a prepaid Visa gift card, nearly untraceable. But it was her handwriting on the receipt, logged by a careless front desk clerk as L. Crest. She'd made a mistake. She's leaving the country, Marla said. No, Kell replied. She's reinventing again. Montreal's perfect. Multilingual. Loose identity checks. Lots of wealth. Lots of lonely old men. Marla clenched her jaw. We're running out of time. Kel believed she had rules. She doesn't kill out of spite, he said. She doesn't torture. She doesn't want revenge. Then he paused. But something happened. What do you mean? She left the journal. She left the trophies. She left the note, for you. That's a break in pattern. A deliberate one. Why? Kel leaned back. She wants to be caught. Not imprisoned. Just, understood. These types usually burn out in one of three ways: suicide, capture, or final confession. She's testing which you'll offer. Marla finally opened the obituary archive Clara mentioned in her cryptic note. April 2009. Detroit. She found it. Michael Sorrells, age 36. Car crash. Died instantly. Unmarried. No family. No next of kin. His obituary was simple. A memorial service hosted by co-workers. One floral arrangement noted, from Clara. I'll never stop loving you. A photo from the service showed a young woman in black, eyes red, standing near the back. Her. Younger. More fragile. More real. Kel reviewed it and said only one thing. She did love him. And when he died, something broke. She didn't learn how to mourn. She studied it. Mastered it. And then weaponized it. Interpol flagged her passport the next morning. She'd already arrived in Montreal. Marla stared at the customs photo. Her hair was lighter. Her face slightly fuller. But the smile? Still perfect. Nathan Kel turned to her. You ready to bring her in? Marla exhaled. No. He raised an eyebrow. No? I'm ready, she said, to make her choose. The last confirmed sighting came on a gray morning in northern Maine. A border town. A bus stop. February snow curling like cigarette smoke in the wind. A security camera mounted above the ticket window captured 24 seconds of footage. Timestamp, 6:12 a.m. A woman with dyed red hair, dark sunglasses, and a trench coat wheeled an elderly man, wrapped in a blanket, breathing through a portable oxygen tank, onto the platform. She smiled down at him. He smiled back. To the untrained eye, it looked like a honeymoon. Love in the after years. Two people cherishing borrowed time. But to the agents watching the tape hours later, it was something else. Her. Even without the signature dress. Even without the veil. They knew. Clara Vaughn. Or Lillian Crest. Or Miriam Stokes. Whatever name she wore now, it didn't matter. She had slipped the net. Again. Interpol was pulled in within hours. Port alerts issued. Customs flagged. Descriptions circulated through every healthcare system in the tri-state area. The FBI's behavioral unit called it an active but non-aggressive fugitive with surgical methodology. Which was profiler speak for. She's too smart to keep killing the same way. And too careful to be caught unless she wants to be. But no fingerprints turned up. No facial matches from the bus depot security feed. No trace of the man she wheeled in. No credit card trail. No hospital records. No obituaries. She had learned to erase. To vanish like mist. But still, the letters came. They started small. An anonymous donation to a grief counseling center in Toledo. No return address. Just an envelope stuffed with $3,000 in used bills, and a typed note that read, "Help someone who doesn't know how to let go." Then came another. A check sent to a retirement home in Michigan, with a floral card signed. For those who kept the forgotten company. Then dozens. Letters arrived at widows' groups, hospitals, support forums. Some with money. Some with handwritten condolences. Some with nothing but grief. One envelope, sent to a bereavement nonprofit in Chicago, contained only a single sentence. He died loved. Isn't that enough? No fingerprints. No DNA. Just that same, deliberate spacing. That same calm grace. Marla Bishop received one, too. To Marla. It arrived on her desk 6 months after the main sighting. Plain envelope. No return address. Main postmark. Inside, a black and white photograph. A man's wrinkled hand resting in a woman's. The edges faded. No faces. Just fingers. Soft. Intertwined. On the back, in careful handwriting. It wasn't murder. It was mercy. He asked me not to let him die alone. I didn't. Marla stared at the photo for a long time. Then filed it under cold cases, closed/unknown. Because what else could she do? Some say she died in Montreal, buried under yet another false identity, next to a man who thought he'd found love again at the edge of life. Others say she only kills in winter, when grief looks natural, and funerals blend into snow. A more romantic theory claims she's taken a vow of silence. That she walks through palliative care wards as a volunteer. No ID. No past. Just a clipboard, soft shoes, and a warm hand. A hospice nurse under yet another name. Helping people die. Helping them feel seen. Helping them believe, if only for a little while, that someone is waiting for them on the other side. Nathan Kell eventually retired. But before he did, he wrote a final note on her case. It reads: Profile summary, unresolved. Suspect displays extraordinary social mimicry, emotional intelligence, and pattern avoidance. Primary motive, emotional validation via constructed intimacy. Modus operandi, embedded romantic relationship with terminal or grieving individuals, culminating in death that appears natural, accidental, or medically justified. Not clinically psychopathic. Displays ethical elasticity in pursuit of control, not chaos. Possible trauma origin, April 2009, Detroit. Unconfirmed. Final assessment. She wasn't hunting victims. She was hunting moments. In time, local legends gave her a name. The Snow Widow. Some say she leaves a white rose at the foot of every hospice bed she visits. Others claim she lights a candle at every funeral she crashes, then vanishes before the final hymn. A nurse in Bangor once told a reporter she remembered a red-haired lady who sat with a dying man for hours, reading to him from a photo album she claimed was hers. He smiled the whole time, the nurse said. When he died, he was holding her hand. I thought she was his daughter. She wasn't. They never saw her again. If you're reading this, and you've ever known someone who seemed too perfect, too available, too comforting, too quietly present in your most broken moment, ask yourself, did you ever see them again? Did anyone else? Because the Snow Widow doesn't want your money. She wants your grief. She wants your final page. And once she has it, she'll leave you smiling. Harlow, Nebraska, was the kind of town that didn't show up on maps unless you were really zoomed in. A dusty dot tucked inside the quiet flatness of the Midwest, swallowed by oceans of cornfields that stretched farther than the eye could see. Harlow didn't get visitors. Harlow didn't make headlines. It was the place people drove through without remembering they'd passed it. But in the fall of 1996, that changed. It began like a whisper, soft, barely noticeable. The kind of thing you could ignore if you wanted to. And people did. At first. Then Clara Wills disappeared. Clara was 19 and working late shifts at Benny's Diner, the only place in town where you could still get a decent slice of cherry pie and a coffee that didn't taste like burnt rubber. Locals knew her. She was kind, sharp-witted, and had dreams bigger than Harlow's city limits. She talked often about saving up and moving to Chicago or maybe Denver. Somewhere with lights that didn't flicker and sidewalks that didn't crack beneath your feet. On September 6th, Clara clocked out at 10:06 p.m. sharp. The last person to see her was Benny himself, wiping down a table by the window. She waved goodbye, said, "See you Monday," and walked into the night. She never made it home. Her car was found the next morning on Route 41, just a mile out of town. Doors locked. Headlights off. Purse still on the passenger seat. Keys dangling from the ignition. And sitting neatly in the center of the driver's seat, a single, pristine ear of corn. It wasn't just strange. It was chilling. Sheriff Boone, a man more used to chasing down stray dogs than leading missing persons cases, tried to play it off. Maybe she ran off. Maybe she got lost. Maybe she had a breakdown. But even he didn't believe that. Clara's family swore she wouldn't just vanish. Her room was untouched, paycheck uncashed, suitcase gathering dust under the bed. The cornfields were the first place people looked. Volunteers and deputies trudged through the stalks, voices echoing her name, boots sinking into the soft, muddy ground. Drones didn't exist back then. There were no infrared cameras or search algorithms. Just people with flashlights, thermoses of lukewarm coffee, and the kind of hope that starts to feel like denial the longer it lingers. They found nothing. No blood. No torn clothes. No signs of struggle. Just the rustling of dry stalks in the September wind and the growing sense that something was watching from the deep green rows. 2 weeks passed. The town held vigils, printed flyers, whispered prayers. Then it happened again. Madeline Kearns. 21. A nursing student home for the semester. Vanished after a jog near her family's farm. Her shoes were found on the dirt road leading into the western fields. And on the seat of her car, parked at the edge of her driveway, an ear of corn, freshly plucked. Panic took root. Parents stopped letting their daughters walk alone. High school football games were canceled. Locks were double-checked. Gun sales quietly spiked at the bait shop. But Harlow didn't have the resources of a big city. They had one sheriff, 2 deputies, and a whole lot of farmland. And then there was the third. Jessica Mallory, 20. Last seen leaving the library at 8:13 p.m. Her bike was ditched behind the building. Another corn ear, this time left on the library steps, as if mocking them. That's when the whispers began to rise. Not just murmurs of fear, but full-blown theories. Everyone had one. Some said it was a serial killer, someone local, someone hiding in plain sight. Others claimed it was something worse. Something not human. A few whispered the word cult with that quiet, terrified reverence reserved for things that were half believed, half dreaded. But whatever it was choosing. Always women. Always alone. Always between 8 and 10 p.m. And always the corn. It became more than a signature. It was a message. No one knew what it meant, but they all felt it. Harlow was no longer safe. Something had cracked beneath its quiet, slow-moving surface. The ground itself felt different. The air, thicker. As if the fields were breathing, listening, waiting. The local paper tried to keep things calm. Sheriff Boone gave tired statements, tried to downplay the pattern, but by October, nobody was buying it. A local pastor stood on his front lawn one morning shouting about fire and brimstone and things that walk in stalks of maize. He was committed the next day to a hospital 2 counties over. The cornfields, once a symbol of life, of harvest, of the American Midwest, became something else entirely. People stopped walking their dogs near them. Children were warned not to wander past the hedgerows. And if you listened close enough at night, you could swear the wind carried something with it. A hum. A whisper. A breath. It didn't help that strange things started happening, too. Cattle mutilations. Radios turning to static at the same exact time. 2:13 a.m. screeching noises in the distance that no one could trace. Entire patches of corn, found flattened in spiraling, unnatural shapes. Cell reception cut out near the fields, even though there were towers just a few miles out. And every week, without fail, another ear of corn would appear somewhere. On the church steps. Inside the post office drop-box. Balanced on the hood of the mayor's car. No new disappearances. Just these, reminders. Like whoever, or whatever, was doing it, was keeping score. Sheriff Boone organized town hall meetings, which quickly devolved into shouting matches and tearful accusations. Curfews were enforced. Roadblocks were set up. Hunters volunteered to patrol the fields in shifts, but nothing ever turned up. Then came the letter. Typed. No return address. No fingerprints. Just one sentence. The field remembers. That same night, a fire broke out on the north side of town. An entire barn reduced to ash. The only thing left untouched was a small section of the nearby corn, blackened on the outside but still standing. Still watching. By late October, Harlow was a ghost town. Businesses shuttered early. Church pews sat empty. School was suspended. Reporters came and went, some laughed, some didn't. But none stayed long. Not after they saw the fields. Not after they felt that cold in the air that didn't match the season. Not after they realized the stories were more than just stories. There's a kind of fear that doesn't scream. That doesn't run. That doesn't even breathe. It just sits with you, in your bones, in the back of your skull, in the silence between crickets. That's the kind of fear that had Harlow by the throat. No one could say exactly when the town stopped pretending. Maybe it was when the Wills family moved away in the dead of night, leaving behind furniture and photos. Maybe it was when Father Elliot smashed his own stained glass windows, claiming they were watching him. Or maybe it was when the power grid failed for 6 straight hours, and every house within 5 miles of Route 41 lost electricity at the same time. Every house except the one nearest the fields. That house? Abandoned since '87. And yet when they checked it the next day, the lights were on. Still humming. But no one was home. By November, the air had changed again. The cold came early that year, and with it came the crows. Thousands of them. Swarming above the corn like smoke. The townsfolk called it an omen. They weren't wrong. One morning, Benny, yes, the same Benny who last saw Clara, walked into his diner and found an ear of corn waiting on the counter, next to the register. That was the last day Benny opened his doors. Eventually, the FBI got involved. Sent a team out. They interviewed, they documented, they left. No statements. No follow-ups. It was as if they didn't want anything to do with Harlow once they saw what was really going on. And yet the town kept going. Or at least tried. Some folks stayed because they had nowhere else to go. Others stayed because leaving felt worse. Like running would only make it angrier. Like leaving would only make you easier to find. There was a theory among the teenagers, a local legend now. They said the corn wasn't just a crop. It was a boundary. A veil. A living thing. And sometimes, it demanded payment. 3 girls in one harvest season. That was the price. Or maybe the warning. Because just as suddenly as it began, the disappearances stopped. No more girls vanished. No more ears of corn appeared in strange places. But the fear? It stayed. And the fields? They never stopped whispering. The call came in just after dawn. Emily Carver, 22. A local girl. Soft-spoken. Volunteer EMT. Known for bringing extra pie to elderly regulars at Benny's Diner. The kind of girl who wrote thank you notes for holiday gifts and always tipped extra on to-go orders. Her body was found 3 miles outside Harlow, in the northern quadrant of the cornfields. A hunter's retriever, off-leash, had gone missing. When the man followed the barking, he saw a patch of soil that didn't look quite right. Fresh. Disrupted. Wrong. What they uncovered stopped Harlow's collective heartbeat. Emily had been buried shallowly, just beneath the topsoil. Corn stalks had been dug up, then replanted over her like someone was trying to sew her back into the land. But it wasn't just the burial. It was the way her body had been left. Hands severed clean at the wrists. Eyes gouged out. Mouth crudely sewn shut with fishing line. A ritual. Or a message. Or both. That was the moment the case left the hands of Sheriff Boone, and entered the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And with it came Special Agent Mara Lark. She arrived alone. No convoy. No suit. Just a battered government sedan and an expression that didn't flinch. Lark was lean, sharp-eyed, early 40s, and carried herself like someone who'd long ago stopped needing to prove anything. A woman who'd seen too much already, and knew there was always more waiting. She shook Boone's hand. Briefly. Politely. Then got to work. Within hours, she had the files spread out in a room above the library. Clara. Madeline. Jessica. Now Emily. For missing, 1 confirmed dead. And in each case, some form of corn left behind. She listened to the tapes, read the witness statements, reviewed the terrain. And what she saw disturbed her more than she let on. Lark had investigated cults before. Ritual killers. Even rural communities with dark secrets buried under generations of silence. But this was different. More methodical. More rooted. Like the violence wasn't just being done in the corn, it was coming from it. But what caught her attention wasn't the grotesque detail of the murder. It was something simpler. All 4 girls had worked at Benny's Diner. That wasn't in the official reports. Boone had noted their jobs, sure. But he hadn't connected the timeline. Lark did. Clara. Madeline. Jessica. Emily. All of them had clocked shifts in the days before their disappearance. All of them had served on the same night. All had waited the same section. Table 6. She pulled the old diner rosters, handwritten and yellowing. Found the logs. Highlighted the names. Same pattern every time, last night alive, always assigned to table 6. She requested the diner's security footage, what little there was. Grainy. Black and white. Only 2 cameras, one over the register, the other near the kitchen door. But it was enough. In each case, she found him. A man. Alone. Sitting at table 6. Same table, same seat, always late at night. Face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. No talking. No orders made aloud. He'd simply point to the menu. Paid in cash. Tips generous. Always left just before the end of the shift. And always disappeared into the night like smoke. Lark ran his frame through FBI facial recognition. Nothing. No match. No prints. No trace. A ghost. She drove out to the fields herself. Refused escort. Said she needed to feel the terrain. Local deputies watched her vanish into the stalks and didn't follow. Not out of disobedience, but fear. No one walked those fields anymore. Not even in daylight. Lark walked for hours. Then she saw it. A grain silo, rusting at the edge of the north fields. The kind of place that should have collapsed decades ago. Padlocked tight. Windows blacked out. A chained gate around it, half swallowed by weeds. Most people wouldn't notice it. Would assume it was condemned. Lark didn't assume anything. She circled it twice. Counted the locks. Noted the shovel marks. Someone had been here recently. That night, under cover of darkness, she returned with bolt cutters and a flashlight. The air inside was dead. Cold. Stagnant. Dust floated like skin in the beam of her light. The scent of dried earth and something older, rotting wood, copper, mildew. And something else. Something sweet and putrid. She stepped carefully, boots crunching on what she thought was gravel, until she looked down. Teeth. Dozens of them. Scattered like seeds. She didn't flinch. The walls were plastered in old newspaper clippings, missing girls, obscure local headlines, faded printouts of the town's layout. Red string connected some. Corn husks were woven and nailed in strange geometric shapes. More than decoration. Symbols. Ritualistic. Almost, language. And then she saw the altar. At the center of the silo, lit only by a shaft of moonlight from a broken roof panel, stood a crude table made of barnwood. Surrounding it, corn dolls, some small as fingers, some the size of toddlers. All made from husks, string, bones, human hair. And Polaroids. At least 20. All of them of the missing girls. Not just Clara, Madeline, Jessica, and Emily, others. Girls who had never even been reported missing. Faces she didn't recognize. All gagged. Bound. Eyes wide with fear. And on the far wall, pinned with a butcher knife, was a calendar. Old. Torn. But recent enough to show this month. And there, circled in red marker, July 20th. 5 days from now. Below the date, scribbled in what Lark hoped was red ink, were 3 words. Final harvest begins. She snapped photos. Bagged what she could. Didn't sleep that night. When she showed Boone the evidence the next morning, his face drained of color. He asked her if she was certain, if it wasn't some sick prank. Lark said nothing. Just dropped the Polaroids onto his desk. Boone vomited in the trash can. The town was on edge again. Lockdowns. Prayers. Hushed conversations in church basements and behind closed doors. But none of them knew what Lark knew. That this wasn't random. It wasn't just about 4 girls. This had been going on for years, maybe decades. Maybe longer. The cornfields weren't just a backdrop. They were the stage. The origin. The sanctuary. And whoever had built that shrine wasn't finished. They called it a children's story. Something to tell at sleepovers and bonfires. A tale told between mouthfuls of candy corn and pumpkin pie. Nothing more than folklore. A warning to stay out of the fields after dark. But in Harlow, Nebraska, every myth starts as a memory. And the memory of the Corn King was older than anyone cared to admit. Whispers said he lived in the soil, beneath the roots, beneath the bones. That he fed on the forgotten. On those lost between rows. He had no face. No voice. Just the rustle of stalks and the feeling of being watched. The legend varied by household. In one version, he was a demon bound by ancient farmers who made a deal to guarantee their crops would never fail. In another, he was a god abandoned by settlers who plowed his sacred land. But in all of them, he needed tribute. A harvest of flesh. A sowing of fear. Agent Mara Lark had no time for fairy tales. But she paid attention when patterns emerged. And the pattern she found led her out of Nebraska, to a dusty archive in Kansas. In 1978, 5 women disappeared across Ellis County. Their bodies, those that were found, had been buried in fields. Corn placed near their heads. Mouths sewn shut. Eyes removed. Hands missing. No one connected the dots then. But Lark did. She laid the photos side by side with her current victims. Same methods. Same silence. Same ritualistic care in how they were left, like the killer wasn't hiding them. He was planting them. She dug deeper. Found the name Josiah Brandt, a hired hand on one of the farms where a body was discovered. Quiet. Reclusive. Known for talking to himself in the fields. Suspected, but never arrested. He died, supposedly, in a fire that consumed a barn just 2 days after the last murder. The official report said there were partial remains. Ashes. A molar. Some blood. But no one had ever confirmed the body. No DNA. No autopsy. Just a name buried with a headstone, and a case closed in ink that hadn't even dried. Lark didn't believe in ghosts. But she believed in men who wanted to become them. So she searched for any trace of Josiah Brandt. No records. No children. No marriage. Nothing. Until 10 years ago. A property sale. Land on the edge of Harlow's farthest eastern fields. Nearly 30 acres. Purchased in cash under the name, John Brandt. The address bordered all 4 of the known crime scenes. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a hunting ground. Lark drove there alone. It wasn't even marked on maps. No mailbox. No fence. Just a gravel path choked with weeds that led to a rusted trailer sitting like a roach in the shadows of the corn. She stepped out, gun holstered, heart steady. The door to the trailer hung slightly ajar. Inside, she found rot. Newspapers stacked to the ceiling. Jars of what looked like teeth. Fish hooks. Rusted pliers. And pinned to the back wall, a mural of corn. Black ink drawings, some frantic and childlike, others almost surgical in detail. Faces drawn into the stalks. Names scratched into the margins. She found one name again and again, Josiah. And beneath it, scratched deeper than the rest. We are not one. Lark backed out slowly, snapped photos, and called for backup. They never made it. Because that same night, someone screamed from the fields. Not the scream of someone dying, but someone surviving. The girl's name was Lydia Bell. She was 19. A recent hire at Benny's, working Clara's old shifts. She'd gone missing 3 days earlier. They found her in a silo 6 miles from the others. Bound at the wrists. Gagged. Bruised. Starved. Surrounded by corn dolls arranged in a circle. Some of the dolls were new. Others, rotted. Mold-covered. Decades old. Someone had been building this shrine for years. Lydia barely clung to consciousness. Lark leaned down beside her, brushing hair from her eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered. But Lydia's eyes rolled back. Her lips cracked open. And with the last breath she had before passing out, she rasped a single word. "Brothers." That one word shifted everything. Lark had thought she was chasing a man. Now she realized, there was more than one. It wasn't just Josiah Brandt. It was a lineage. She reviewed the files again. Birth records. Census logs. Scoured every Brandt family mentioned in the Midwest going back a century. And she found them. Twins. Born in 1951. Josiah and Ezekiel Brandt. One listed as dying in the barn fire. The other? Officially disappeared in 1972. No death certificate. No trace. But property records revealed something stranger. The original Brandt farm in Kansas had been sold off piece by piece, except for one corner of it, signed over to a religious group that no longer existed. The Church of the Last Sheaf. A fringe cult that believed in agricultural sacrifice, worship of the harvest father, and rituals involving corn, binding, and silence. Lark's mouth went dry. It wasn't just about Harlow. It was about what came before Harlow. The land. The blood on it. And those who vowed to keep feeding it. That night, she returned to the trailer with a full tactical team. But the trailer was empty. Gutted. Burned from the inside. Only one thing remained intact, a Polaroid pinned to the wall with a corncob skewer. It showed Lark. Standing in the fields. The photo had been taken just days ago. Beneath it, written in a smear of what looked like blood. Last seed. Last supper. We come together. And below that, one final line. July 20th. She will kneel. 4 days left. And now Lark knew, this wasn't a case. It was a harvest. Mara Lark had always believed monsters wore human faces. But she was wrong. Sometimes, they wore masks made of corn husks, stitched with the hair of the forgotten. After Lydia Bell muttered that one chilling word, brothers, Lark's path became razor clear. This wasn't the work of a lone killer or a single deranged man hiding in cornfields. It was a system, buried like a taproot in the soil beneath Harlow. A network. A legacy. She sat alone in the library archive for 16 hours straight. Coffee cold. Eyes dry. Documents scattered like dead leaves. Old land deeds showed a pattern. Dozens of farms in and around Harlow had been bought, sold, and handed down over the past century, all between a familiar set of surnames. Brandt. Wilkes. Grahn. Toller. Families no one had thought to question. But Lark questioned them. She matched these names to birth records, obituaries, property transfers, church rolls, even tax filings from defunct agrarian fellowships. And in the dust of forgotten microfilm, she uncovered what she feared most. The Brothers of the Husk. They had been born from dust and desperation. Founded in 1913 by Josiah Brandt, the sect was rooted in warped agrarian folklore, tales twisted into ritual. They believed the land had a spirit, a hunger that could only be fed by human life. To sow the body is to feed the earth, one journal entry read. To silence the mouth is to let the soil speak. The early years were masked by coincidence, accidental deaths, disappearances blamed on roaming vagrants or mental illness. But each planting coincided with miraculous crop yields, unseasonal growth, and record harvests. It was enough to earn them converts. The cult grew small, secretive. Men raised sons, passed on the rites, taught them to bind, to sow, to sacrifice. They disappeared from public view but never left. They became the land. They became the farmers. The man at table 6. Just a servant. One of many. Lark understood then, the diner was a feeding trough. A marketplace of bodies. They watched. They waited. They chose. And now, the date circled in red on the calendar was here, July 20th. Final harvest. She called in a tactical team. Coordinated a 3-pronged raid with FBI and state agents under cover of night. 3 properties. 3 suspected safehouses used by known associates of the Brandt lineage. The operation began at 1 a.m. By dawn, they had cracked open hell. Property 1, a sprawling barn outside Wilkes Hollow. Agents broke the lock and swept inside, rifles drawn. What they found froze them in place. 8 women, alive but barely. Drugged. Shackled. Their skin was pale, eyes unfocused, arms dotted with puncture wounds. Some were missing fingernails. Others had corn silk woven into their hair like crowns. They had been fed just enough to survive, but not enough to escape. The floor beneath them was packed with old hay and damp soil. Symbols carved into the wood. Corn husks braided into nooses, hanging like decorations from the rafters. One of the agents, a seasoned veteran of cartel raids, stepped outside and vomited. Property 2, a farmhouse converted into a chapel. From the outside, it looked abandoned. But the door was barred from the inside. A battering ram cleared the way. Inside was a sight pulled straight from Nightmare. An entire room reconfigured into a makeshift sanctuary, walls draped with black corn stalks. Pews made of old crates. Skulls lined the altar. 12 masked men knelt in unison, their heads bowed in prayer. Each wore robes stitched from burlap, each mask carved from dried husk, sealed with resin and blood. One man stood at the pulpit. In his hand, a ceremonial blade. Rusted. Ritualistic. At his feet, a girl no older than 17, unconscious and draped in linen. He raised the knife. He never brought it down. Lark herself was the one who fired the shot. One round to the shoulder. The man screamed and collapsed. The others didn't move. They simply stayed kneeling, chanting in a low, guttural drone. It took 6 agents to detain them. None of them resisted. None of them spoke. They simply smiled, as if they'd been waiting to be caught. As if this, too, was part of the plan. Property 3, the most remote. A wooded plot miles from paved road, bordering the northern corn belt. No house. No structure. Just a rusted silo, the one Lark had found days earlier, now burned to its foundation. And inside the earth, a shallow grave, freshly dug, but empty. The grave had a name carved into a plank of cedar. Mara. But the worst discovery of the night wasn't in the chapel. It was in the footage. One of the agents recovered an old VHS tape from a shrine inside the first barn. Lark played it in private, knowing it would be bad. It was worse. The tape showed John Brandt, face half in shadow, kneeling in a cornfield. He was speaking to the camera. The harvest is begun. The soil has been fed. The husk will bloom, and from it, we shall rise. He looked up. Right into the lens. Right at her. Mara, he whispered. Your roots are deeper than you know. Come home. Then static. John Brandt, whoever he really was, had vanished. Gone before the raids. No trail. No prints. Just his disciples, still smiling in interrogation rooms. Still chanting that same word over and over again. Feed. And somewhere out there, the true harvest had only just begun. Time passed. Not quickly. Not cleanly. In the public eye, the case of the Brothers of the Husk was over. Closed. Contained. Buried like rotting stalks after the frost. The headlines faded. Cult dismantled in Nebraska, dozens rescued. FBI hero Agent Lark commended. Dark harvest ends in justice. But the land didn't care about headlines. And neither did Agent Mara Lark. She stayed in Nebraska until the last report was filed. Oversaw the seizures. Spoke at the survivors' relocation hearings. Gave statements to news outlets, smiling for cameras that couldn't see how tired her eyes had become. The truth, she knew, was not in the files. Because truth didn't come in ink and tape. It came in whispers, low, rustling, living in the silence between answers. And those whispers never stopped. She tried to return to normal. Moved back to Denver. Repainted her walls. Got a dog. Took therapy seriously. Her therapist said she had PTSD. Nightmares. Hallucinations. Residual trauma. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why, some nights, Mara would wake up with the faint smell of soil under her nails. The sound of corn brushing against glass, even though her windows were shut. She checked. Always checked. Nothing. Until 6 months later. It was a Thursday. Cold, flat winter air. Snow not yet fallen, but close. Lark had just returned from a grocery run. Tossed her keys in the bowl by the door. The dog didn't bark. Just stared, ears back, eyes pinned to the hallway, tail stiff as bone. Then came the knock. No footsteps. No doorbell. Just a single knock, like someone pressing a finger against her spine from inside her bones. She opened the door. No one there. Just a package. Wrapped in brown paper. No label. No return address. No postmark. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph. Her heart stopped. It was her bedroom. The photo showed Mara asleep. In her bed. That exact bed. The same sheets. Same pillow. Just taken from an angle that suggested someone had stood less than 2 feet from her. But that wasn't the worst part. On the nightstand, next to her head, sat an ear of corn. Pale yellow. Fresh. Damp with morning dew. It hadn't been there when she went to sleep. And it wasn't there now. She flipped the photo over. One line. Written in red ink. Not pen. Not marker. Just, red. You cannot kill the roots. Mara tore through the apartment. Checked every door. Every window. Every lock. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No cameras catching a face. The corn? Gone. She ran the photo through Bureau Labs. No prints. No DNA. No traceable materials. Just clean terror. The analyst looked at her with confusion. You sure this isn't a prank? She said nothing. Because how do you explain the wind? That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. The Polaroid burned a hole on her desk. And outside, in the darkness beyond the suburban streets and porch lights, something moved. It wasn't a shape. Not quite. It was the feeling of movement. Of something sliding between blades of grass. Of soil shifting in its sleep. Of roots curling toward home. And then, faint, so faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it, came the sound of corn stalks swaying. No wind. No storm. Just whispers. The same ones she'd heard in the fields outside Harlow. The same ones that came before the disappearances began. She closed her eyes. But the whispers only grew louder. Because some seeds don't die. They wait.